This is Audible.
This is Marrying Mr. Wrong, written by Claire Kingsley, narrated by Savannah Peachwood and Aidan Snow.
Chapter 1. Sophie. I never should have gone commando in this dress. People wandered by, men in tuxes and women in evening gowns, and I swore I could feel a breeze wafting up my legs and brushing my backside. Was I standing near a vent or something? The hotel ballroom was beautifully decked out for the gala and auction. It was a great cause, benefiting big brothers, big sisters. Long tables held silent auction items, and the live auction would take place on the temporary stage in front of the panoramic windows. Tables were decorated with fancy linens, and 2 bars provided drinks to the well-dressed guests. The problem was, I'd totally forgotten about coming to this benefit. My boss, Shepard Calloway, and his wife, Everly, who's one of my best friends, were supposed to attend. I'm Mr. Calloway's executive assistant, so I arranged the details. They attended the events, but Everly was pregnant, and yesterday her ankles had seemed a bit swollen. She was sure it was nothing to be concerned about, as was her doctor. But Mr. Calloway had developed an impressive level of protective paranoia when it came to his pregnant wife. He'd cleared his schedule for the next few days to make sure he could be there for Everly. It really was rather cute. But it left me in the position of filling in for them at this gala, which I'd forgotten about until the last minute. And because I'm Sophie Abbott, expert hot mess, in my haste to get myself presentable enough for a black tie gala and be on time and not break a nail and find shoes that were formal enough but would allow me to walk, I'd completely forgotten to put on underwear. Who forgets to put on underwear? Me, that's who. At least I'd remembered a bra. That's important when you have curves, and I have plenty of those. So here I was, a bra dutifully taming the twins and my dark blonde curls behaving nicely, but nothing below the waist except the thin fabric of my red dress. My rather short, thin red dress. Was it see-through? Could people see my butt crack? That was probably my biggest concern at this point. I glanced over my shoulder, wondering if I'd catch someone looking down and pondering the nature of what was beneath my too light and flimsy to go commando dress. A man in a black tux stood nearby, his eyes locked on my butt. He could tell. I sighed and moved farther down the silent auction table. At this point, I had to either cut out early and go home, or resign myself to the fact that a handful of people in the room were going to notice and stare. What would my friends do? My 3 best friends always seemed to be put together in ways I was not. Everly would have Mr. Calloway to block her from view. His icy stare would freeze any man who dared to look at his wife. Hazel would never have worn this dress in the first place. She'd be wearing something much more practical, and lined. But Nora? She'd just own it. So maybe that was the answer. Channel my inner Nora. After all, tonight couldn't get any worse. I was already dateless at a charity benefit where I didn't know anyone, socially at least, wearing a dress that made me feel like I was in one of those nightmares where you're naked on stage in front of an audience. And then, just like that, it got worse. A man in a dark suit met my eyes from across the room. Gasping, I quickly turned away. Oh no, it was Dr. Hansy Perv. My elderly father was on a quest to find me a husband, and had appointed himself matchmaker, which meant he tried to set me up with just about every single man he met who appeared to be between the ages of 20 and 50. The neighborhood mail carrier, the guy putting stickers on bananas at the grocery store, the waiter at our favorite restaurant, his ophthalmologist, the guy who did his taxes. This one, Dr. Schilling, was the surgeon who'd recently performed a minor procedure on his wrist. When Dad had gone in for a follow-up, he'd somehow convinced the doctor to go on a date with his daughter. I'd gone to appease my dad and very quickly wished I hadn't. Dr. Schilling had spent the entire evening finding excuses to touch me, and not in cute ways that made me want him to touch me more. He'd groped and leered and made me so uncomfortable I'd faked a sudden bout of food poisoning and left. Later, when I'd dished to my friends about it over martinis, we'd named him Dr. Handsy Perv. And there he was, just on the other side of the silent auction tables. I risked a quick peek. He was talking to someone else, but his eyes flicked toward me. This was so awkward. Turning, I almost walked right into a man in a black tux with silver hair and glasses. He deftly shifted his drink out of the way so he wouldn't spill. "I'm so sorry." He didn't reply, just furrowed his brow in annoyance and went around me. My heart beat faster, and I cast another glance at Dr. Handsy Perv, or where Dr. Handsy Perv had been a few seconds ago. Where had he gone? "Sophie!" His hand slid onto my elbow, and I practically jumped out of my heels. Jerking my arm away, I spun around and took a step back. "Dr. Schilling." "We're not in my office. There's no need to be formal. You can call me Randall." "Right, of course. Randall." He stepped closer and ran his hand up and down my arm. "Glad to see you recovered." God, why was he so touchy? His hands were cold and clammy. Gross. "Yeah, thanks. I'm feeling a lot better." His eyes swept up and down in a way that made my stomach turn. It wasn't sexy or provocative. It was creepy, like he was sizing me up to see if I'd fit in the trunk of his car. "Excuse me, I have to—" "Randall!" Someone called his name, and I took advantage of his momentary distraction to dart away. The live auction hadn't started yet, but I'd just have to miss it. I needed to get out of here before Dr. Handsy Perv could corner me. I quick-walked toward my table where I'd left my coat, willing myself to not trip in my heels, and adjusted the thin strap of my small black purse. Thankfully, I made it without any mishaps. Congratulating myself on my successful walk across the room, it wasn't much, but I believe in celebrating the little things. I scooped up my coat and turned, and bumped into someone, again. This time, it was a woman in a shimmery black evening gown with a plunging neckline. "I'm sorry." I started to reach for her drink to make sure she didn't spill, but pulled back at the last second because I'd probably wind up making it worse. She recovered quickly, the surprise in her expression melting into a smile. She looked like she was in her mid-30s, with dark hair and an updo and deep red lipstick. "No harm done. Are you all right?" "Yes, thank you." My eyes started to the side. Dr. Handsy Perv was still occupied by the man who'd called his name, but his gaze was on me. I shuddered. She followed my gaze. "Let me guess. Ex-boyfriend?" "Oh, no, we only went on one date. Or maybe it was half a date. Either way, it was very uncomfortable." "I totally understand. We've all been there." She took a casual sip of her drink. "I love your dress. It's very flattering." I glanced down at myself. "Thanks. Yours is pretty too." Her lips curled in a smile. "Thank you." Dr. Handsy Perv broke off from his conversation and started heading in our direction. "Don't worry." She set down her drink, then shifted so she was beside me and slipped her arm through mine. "Us girls need to stick together. I'll get you out of here." We started toward the ballroom doors, arm in arm. "Thank you so much." I glanced over my shoulder. Oh my God, he's following. Persistent, isn't he? I'm Ruby, by the way. "Sophie." She gave my arm a reassuring squeeze as we walked through the large double doors. "Some men don't know how to take a hint. We'll disappear into the ladies' room." The restrooms were just across the hallway, and we ducked inside. I let out a long breath while Ruby checked her hair in the mirror. She got out her phone and started typing. "Are you here alone?" she asked. I smoothed down my dress and shifted my coat, which was still hanging over my arm. "Yes, unfortunately. You?" "My husband is here, but he went back to our room already." "Are you from out of town or just making a night of it?" "Making a night of it. Hotels have a way of spicing things up." She tucked her phone into her black clutch. I'll make sure the coast is clear. Thank you so much. My pleasure. She opened the door and peeked out, then let it fall closed again. He's still out there, isn't he? I asked. He is, and he's standing in the middle of the hallway, so he's blocking your access to the ballroom and the lobby. I shuddered again. So creepy. I'm genuinely worried he has a syringe in his pocket and he's going to drug me. He gives off that vibe, doesn't he? How about we go upstairs to my room? We can have a drink while we wait for him to give up the chase. I don't want to impose. Nonsense, she said, slipping her arm through mine again. We'd love to have you. Smiling at my good fortune at having bumped into Ruby, I let her lead me out of the ladies' room. We took a quick right toward the elevators, and she pressed the button. Sophie, Dr. Handsy Perv called behind me. Pretend you don't hear him, Ruby whispered. Come on, elevator, come on, open. Sophie, where are you? The elevator dinged, and the doors swished open. Ruby and I darted inside, and I jammed my finger on the close button. Dr. Handsy Perv jogged down the hallway toward us, but the doors closed just in time. I let out a long breath. Wow, he really must like you, Ruby said. My tummy felt a little tickle as the elevator rose. I don't know if anyone has ever made me more uncomfortable than that guy. Then I'm glad we ran into each other. No one needs that in their life. The doors opened to the second floor, and I followed her down the hall. Thank you again, I said, my voice emphatic. You really didn't have to do all this. You're missing the auction. She waved off my comment. Believe me, I don't mind. This is much more fun. Besides, before I got married, I dated a couple of creepers. I know how awful it is. She stopped in front of a door and swiped her key card, then pushed it open. I hesitated behind her. Dr. Handsy Perv had to have given up by now, and I could find a different set of elevators, go back down to the lobby, and be on my way. I probably shouldn't be going into a stranger's hotel room, even if she was nice. I should actually get going, I said. I appreciate your help, but it's no trouble at all, I promise. A man in a dress shirt with the tie undone appeared in the open door. He was tall, with sleek, dark hair and a square jaw. They made a gorgeous couple. There you are, he said, slipping an arm around her waist. He brushed her lips with a light kiss, then his eyes moved to me. Did you make a friend again? This is Sophie. Isn't she sweet? I invited her up for a drink. She glanced at me. This is my husband, Marcus. Hi, I said. His gaze flicked up and down, and he gave me a friendly smile. Nice to meet you. Come in. Ruby hooked my arm and led me inside. Their suite was beautiful, with a sitting area, a wet bar, and big windows. Through another door, I could see a large bedroom with a king bed. Ruby dropped my arm, and I wandered slowly around the room, gazing at the opulent furnishings and beautiful art on the walls. Ruby is the social one of the two of us. She makes new friends wherever we go. Marcus paused next to the bar. What can I get you, Sophie? Before I could answer, Ruby sidled up to him and slipped her hand in his. Honey, I was thinking, we already had drinks downstairs. Shouldn't we do something more fun? Marcus looked me up and down again, the corner of his mouth lifting in a smile. You're right. I think we should. Ruby turned back to me and nibbled on her lower lip. What do you think, Sophie? Are you up for a little fun? I froze in place, not sure how to answer that question. The energy in the room buzzed with sudden weirdness. What did she mean by that? Marcus glanced at her with a raised eyebrow. You didn't ask her already. I wanted to introduce you first. You know I trust your judgment. His eyes flicked to me. But she's perfect. Isn't she? Perfect for what? I asked. Ruby took a step toward me and grabbed my hand. Marcus and I like to add a little spice to our relationship by including a friend. My eyes widened. Did she mean... Oh, I'm not... I don't... She ran her thumb along the backs of my knuckles. I know you've probably never done something like this before. You have a certain innocence about you. It's why I asked you up here. But I think the three of us could have an amazing time together." Marcus tapped something, then held out a silver tray toward Ruby. My eyes widened more. There were 3 lines of white powder on the tray. Oh, holy shit. My heart slammed a furious beat behind my ribs. Oh my God, she'd brought me up here to do cocaine and have a threesome with her and her husband. "Would you like some?" Ruby asked, gesturing toward the tray. "It really enhances the experience." Sudden panic made my mind go blank. Instead of doing the rational thing and politely declining, then walking out the door, I did the Sophie thing. I made a mess. Stepping backward, I jerked my hand out of Ruby's grasp. I teetered on my heels. Damn it, I'd been doing so well in them tonight, and flung my arms out for balance. My hand crashed into the tray of drugs, and sent it flying through the air, spraying a shower of white powder all over Marcus. Oh my God, cocaine in the air. "Don't breathe, Sophie. Don't get it in your nose." Ruby shouted something, and Marcus staggered backward. I dove into the bedroom and slammed the door shut behind me. I quickly turned the lock and put my back to the door, my breath coming in gasps. Great. I was like the dumb girl in the horror movie who ran upstairs, trapping herself in the house with the killer. Frantically, I looked for a way out while Ruby and Marcus called my name through the door. What had I gotten myself into? Dr. Hansy Perv would have been better than this. Well, maybe. One of them rattled the doorknob. Maybe they'd have to get housekeeping to unlock it. I could hide in the bathroom until then. No, that wasn't a good plan. Not that locking myself in here was good either, but at this point I had to work with what I had. The only other door led to a balcony, which gave me an idea. After all, we were only on the 2nd floor. With my heart still racing and Ruby and Marcus trying to talk to me through the door, I checked the closet. There were white towels and a few fluffy pillows, but on the top shelf, I found what I was looking for: extra bed sheets. I grabbed the neatly folded stack of soft cotton and madly shook it out while I darted for the balcony. The cold air hit me, and I realized that at some point I'd dropped my coat. Too late to worry about that now. By some small miracle, my purse still hung off my shoulder, so that was something. I moved the strap over my head to the other shoulder so I wouldn't lose it on the way down. I glanced over the balcony. It overlooked an inner courtyard with stone-paved paths and lush landscaping. A fountain trickled, glowing with lights. It was now or never. I tied the sheets together, then fastened one end to the railing, hoping the knots would hold. Although I'm not what anyone would call skinny, usually I don't mind my ample curves. But right then, I sort of wished I'd been built a little less shapely. Oh well, too late to go on a diet now. Here went nothing. I tossed the loose end of the sheet down and hoisted myself over the side. My shoes slipped off my feet and clattered to the ground below. The breeze chose that exact moment to pick up, billowing the red fabric of my dress. God, that was cold. It was almost like I wasn't wearing any panties, which I wasn't. Thankfully, no one was down there. "Hey, what are you doing?" Scratch that. There was someone down there. I groaned. Of course there was. This was me. If something could go wrong, it would. "Careful," the man below me said. He had a slight southern drawl. "You should..." Whoa. The wind whipped my dress around again, sending a chill straight up my... Anyway. "Stop looking up my dress. I'm trying to get down." "I wasn't..." He cleared his throat. "Kind of hard to avoid." My feet were braced against the lower part of the balcony, and my arms already burned from the effort of holding the sheet. These probably felt great to sleep on, but for escape purposes, they were really slippery. "Are you stuck?" he asked. I hesitated for a second. "Maybe." "Okay, here's what you're going to do." His voice was calm and commanding, and if I hadn't been hanging off a balcony about to fall to my death, I probably would have found his accent unbelievably charming. It reminded me of Matthew McConaughey. "You're going to let your feet drop, and you'll slide down. Just make sure you have a good grip on the sheet first. I'll be at the bottom to catch you. And don't look down." I looked and let out a squeak. "I said don't look down." "You can't say don't look down. Obviously, that's just going to make me look." "Come on," he said, his tone strong and soothing. "Slide on down. I've got you." Okay. I took a fortifying breath and released my feet. I squeaked again as I slid, gritting my teeth against the burn of the fabric in my hands. Too fast. I was going too fast. I was going to... Strong arms caught me around my waist, bringing me to a sudden stop. The breath rushed from my lungs, and I let go of the sheet as he set me gently on the ground. Oh, good. I didn't die. "Why the hell were you climbing off a balcony with a sheet?" I brushed my unruly curls out of my face, scooped up my shoes, and started walking away barefoot. They offered me cocaine and wanted to do a threesome. I panicked. "Thank you for helping me down, but I have to go." "Wait, what?" He jogged a few steps to catch up with me. "Never mind. I don't blame you if you don't believe me." "No, I believe you. Are you all right? Do you need a ride or something?" I kept walking, although I wasn't sure if I was heading in the right direction. Away from the scary cocaine couple and the guy who'd just seen up my dress. No, after the night I've had, the last thing I'm going to do is get in a car with someone I don't know. I guess I won't know an Uber driver if I order a ride, but that doesn't count. But maybe I'll call one of my friends, because clearly my night is cursed, and I'll probably get picked up by a psychotic axe murderer. "Where are you going?" "To the lobby." "That's not the way to the lobby." I stopped and let out a breath. I needed to slow down and think. My eyes lifted, meeting his, and I choked on my own spit. It was him. I hadn't seen him in person in at least 20 years, since we were kids, but he was low-key famous now, especially in Seattle. Besides, I'd never forget that face. Camden Cox. "It's you." He gave me a smile that made it clear he wasn't surprised to be recognized, but gave no indication that he knew who I was. Jerk. His expression softened, and for a second I wondered if my snap judgment was wrong and he did remember me. He blinked, and one corner of his mouth lifted slightly. A swarm of butterflies took flight in my stomach, and that sexy little grin of his sent a pleasant tingle down my spine. Camden Cox hadn't just grown up sexy. He'd grown up drop-dead gorgeous. Thick, dark hair, haunting gray eyes, sharp cheekbones, and square jaw. He wore the hell out of his dark suit with a vest and tie. "What's your name?" he asked. Like a record scratch, I jolted back to reality, no longer under the hypnotic spell of a gorgeous man, or his slow southern drawl. He didn't remember me. Yep, jerk. "Sophia," I said, using my birth name. I didn't know why. No one had ever called me Sophia, not even when I was a baby. But at this point, I didn't want him to realize who I was. "Nice to meet you, Sophia. I'm Camden Cox, but everybody calls me Cox. Are you sure I can't get you a ride or—" "No thanks," I said quickly. "I'll get myself home. Thanks for helping me off the balcony." I glanced around to orient myself and saw a sign pointing to the lobby. Before he could say anything else, I walked away, my heels dangling from my hands, the chill night air still wafting up my dress.
Chapter 2. Cox. Sophia. She walked away toward the lobby this time, the sway of her hips positively hypnotic. I stood rooted to the spot, mesmerized. Her scent lingered in my nose, and I could still feel the slight tickle of her soft hair against my face. I'd never been so awestruck by a woman before. It wasn't because I'd seen up her dress and seen everything. Granted, that had taken me by surprise. Who expects to look up and see a woman climbing off a second-story balcony in a dress with no panties? It was certainly a first for me. No, there had been something about her, about the sound of her voice and the smell of her hair. the way she'd felt sliding down the front of my body when I'd caught her and set her on her feet. Sophia. I hadn't even gotten her last name. For a second, I considered chasing after her. After all, I'm Camden Cox, and when I want something, I get it. But she'd already disappeared inside, and the fact that such a brief, albeit unusual encounter had rattled me like this made me hesitate. Pulling myself together, I adjusted my cuffs. Whoever she was gone now. I doubted I'd ever see her again, which was fine. There were plenty of women in the world. I wasn't going to be preoccupied with the identity of that one. That turned out to be a lie. Monday afternoon at work, I was still thinking about Sophia. Her soft, curly hair, the curves beneath her dress, other things beneath her dress. It was annoying. I shifted in my chair, trying to make room in my pants. She couldn't have been that hot. My memory must have exaggerated, fooled me into thinking she was special. Or maybe I'd had more to drink that night than I'd thought. Didn't matter. I turned my attention back to my computer screen. It wasn't as if I didn't have more than enough to keep me occupied. My assistant rapped on the door and poked his head inside. "It's 3, he said in his posh British accent. "Come in." Oliver Carrington waltzed in, looking impeccable as usual. Tweed vest over a button-down shirt, fitted slacks, not a single auburn hair out of place, nor the tiniest scuff on his expensive shoes. He'd worked for me for years and was brilliant at his job. Putting up with me wasn't easy, so I paid him well for it. He set down a silver tray with a teapot, 2 teacups, and a plate of finger sandwiches. Somehow he'd built afternoon tea into my daily routine. I'd stopped arguing with him about it. Hell, I could even admit that I enjoyed it. I was a Texas boy at heart. As a kid, I'd moved around a lot, including several years in Seattle, but I'd spent more time in Texas than anywhere else. But even this Texas boy could appreciate a hot cup of tea and some finger sandwiches, although sometimes I did add whiskey. He poured, then took a seat on the other side of my desk. "Do you want the good news or the bad news?" "Bad." "Good, because I only have bad news. Thiago Santos is out." Fuck. I left my tea untouched and sat back in my chair. Thiago was the third investor to drop out of the Skyline project since my now former business partner Dominic Coates had fucked me over with a public sex scandal. He'd resigned, saving me the trouble of getting rid of him, but now I had to clean up the mess and keep this project afloat. Oliver adjusted his glasses. "We knew it was coming." "I know, but this project is on the verge of collapse." "Well, who do we know who might be interested?" I'd been thinking about that very thing all day. Jackson Bennett might be, but he's hard to pin down these days. Family man now. What about Richard Calloway? I'd work with Richard in a heartbeat, but he's become a lot more conservative with his investments. I pressed the tips of my fingers together. But maybe Shepard Calloway. Oliver raised his eyebrows. Are you making the phone calls? Because getting a meeting with Shepard Calloway isn't easy. I scowled at him. He'll see me. He made a non-committal sound in his throat. The door flew open. Althea marched into my office and put her hands on her hips. Thiago Santos? He's out, I said. She pinched her lips together. My lawyer, Althea McClellan, could have passed for a woman in her 30s rather than 50, although Botox probably had a lot to do with that. A blouse and slacks dressed her tall, slender frame, and her blonde hair was pulled back in a low bun. This is a problem, she said. I realize that, but do you? I leveled her with a hard stare. I'm working on it. Her expression softened. I know you are. I'm just panicking because we're in danger of losing this entire deal. We won't lose the deal. I'm thinking of bringing in Shepard Calloway. She lifted her eyebrows. Good choice. We know he has the capital. Do you need me to make some calls? Oliver set his teacup down with a clink. I don't think that's necessary. I'll set up a meeting. Didn't you just say getting a meeting with him isn't easy? I asked. He scowled at me. I'll get you the meeting. Althea looked skeptical but didn't argue with him, which was something of a miracle. Oliver and Althea only tolerated each other because they had to. Keep me posted. She cast a quick glare at Oliver, then laughed. That's it, Maleficent, Oliver muttered. Back to your black castle of darkness. I chuckled, then took a sip of my tea. Obviously, I need a backup plan if Calloway says no, but for now, we'll take this one step at a time. He checked his watch. Speaking of meetings with investors, you have one with Irene Prager at her office in less than half an hour. Nodding, I took a finger sandwich and popped it in my mouth. Irene Prager was one of the remaining Skyline investors. The fact that she wanted to meet in person was a good sign. It meant I had a shot at convincing her to see the project through. This was the biggest development deal of my career. I was not going to lose it now. Do you need me to join you? Oliver asked. Yeah, you should come. Irene loves you. He grinned. It's the accent. Drives the ladies wild, I said. And if it puts Irene in a stick-with-Cox development mood, even better. I'll do my best to be suitably charming. Oliver and I finished up with the tea and he took it away. Irene's office was only 2 blocks away and it was warm for March, so I decided to walk. I slipped on my suit jacket and waited for Oliver to join me. We went down the elevator to the lobby and through the glass front doors. Blue sky peeked out between the skyscrapers and the hum of traffic filled the air. The first job I'd taken here in Seattle had been in this very building, working for a commercial real estate developer. Only 3 years later, I'd bought him out. Now I owned the building. The scent of food wafted from the open door of a restaurant, making me glad I wasn't heading to this meeting on an empty stomach. There was definitely something to Oliver's insistence on afternoon tea. We crossed the street and Oliver stopped in his tracks. He tilted his head, peering into a shop on the corner. What are you doing? I asked. Shh. Did you just shush me? He held up a hand and took a tentative step forward, his head still tilted at an odd angle. Give me 1 second. It was a tea shop, aptly named Spot of Tea. But I had no clue why Oliver was staring through the window like a creeper. You like tea a lot more than I realized, I said. I'm a little worried, to be honest. It's not the tea, it's... He stopped and let out what could only be described as a sigh. Her. I moved closer so I could see the girl working behind the counter. She had long, light brown hair and wore a white apron over her blue shirt. Who is she? I don't know. They don't wear name tags. But I think I'm going to marry her. I snort-laughed. Marry her? You might be skipping a few steps if you don't even know her name. He adjusted his glasses. I know. I'm working on it. Well, either get your ass in there and ask her out, or let's keep walking. We have a meeting to get to, and you're blocking the sidewalk. He huffed, but tore his gaze away from her. Fine. But I'm not kidding. I look at her and I have this feeling. She's destined to be my wife. I resumed walking, and Oliver fell in step beside me. Since when are you so interested in getting married? I'm not interested in marriage for the sake of getting married, although my mother certainly has opinions about that. You'd think she's the matriarch of a wealthy family desperate for an heir. You and me both. My mother had something of an obsession with me getting married, which was unfortunate for her because I wasn't the marrying type. But wouldn't it be nice to come home to that special someone every night? He asked. Not really. He laughed. You'd think you're a confirmed old bachelor, not a very eligible man in his 30s. Maybe I'm ahead of my time. Confirmed old bachelor sounds fine to me. Oliver laughed again, but I wasn't kidding. My parents' marriage had been a shit show, and I'd decided years ago that marriage wasn't for me. I dated women all the time, but never anything serious, and I had a great life. I'd risen from nothing, and now I worked hard, played hard, and enjoyed the many fruits of my labor without having to answer to anyone. Why the hell would I ever change the way I lived? We got to Irene Prager's office, and by the time we left, Oliver and I had charmed her into sticking with the Skyline project. I texted Althea on the way back, letting her know we'd salvaged one of our investors. Thank fuck. Now, I just needed to get that meeting with Shepard Calloway.
Chapter 3. Sophie. The spring air was pleasant as I walked from my office to the bistro. I was meeting my friends for lunch, and I wasn't running late. Go me. I'd recovered from my mishaps at Saturday's gala with wine and a, for the millionth time, viewing of Pride and Prejudice. The good news was Dr. Hansy Perv hadn't tried to contact me since. Apparently, running away from him and darting into an elevator with a stranger had gotten the message across. That wasn't a bad silver lining to my Saturday night debacle. I paused outside the bistro and glanced at my reflection in the window of a parked car. It felt like I might have something in my teeth, so I leaned down and used the window as a mirror. Just as I was curling my upper lip back so I could see my gum line, the window lowered, revealing a young guy in the driver's seat. I froze, my face contorted in a strange grimace. "Sorry." He shook his head slowly and put the window up again. "Lovely." I straightened, let out a sigh, and turned to go into the restaurant. By some miracle, I didn't trip or bump into anyone when I crossed the sidewalk. That made me smile. 1 out of 2 wasn't bad. The bistro had lively Italian music playing in the background and tables decorated with checkered cloths. Nora, Hazel, and Everly were already there, seated near the back. I carefully picked my way around the other customers, making sure I didn't bump into anyone or smack them with my purse. I'd met Everly a couple of years ago when she'd hired me to replace her as Mr. Calloway's assistant so she could start a new job as the executive director of a charitable foundation. She'd invited me to come for a run and drinks afterward with her and Nora and Hazel, and because sometimes even I got lucky, I'd fit right in. Now here I was with 3 of the best friends a girl could ask for. "Hey, Soph." Nora wiggled her fingers at me. Her dark hair was down in loose waves, and she wore a deep red shirt and jeans. "Hi, ladies." With a smile, I carefully took off my light jacket and draped it over the back of my chair, then sat. Everly was next to Nora, wearing a yellow dress, her blonde hair pinned up. You could just see her baby bump, which was the cutest thing ever. Hazel sat on her other side, wearing a tan cardigan over a white blouse. Her new wedding ring sparkled on her left hand. She and her husband Corbin had opted for a short engagement and small wedding, and had recently returned from their honeymoon. "How are you feeling?" I asked Everly. "Did the swelling go down?" "It did. I just need to remember to put my feet up at the end of the day, but otherwise I feel great." "You really do make the cutest pregnant woman," Nora said. "It's done wonders for your complexion." Everly touched her cheeks. "Thanks. Speaking of the baby, I have news. We found out this morning that we're having a girl." I clutched my hands to my chest and firmly ignored the way my ovaries jumped up and down, trying to get my attention. "When is it our turn, Sophie?" Nora reached over to grab Everly's hands. "Oh, honey, I'm so happy for you." "I imagine Shepard displayed an uncharacteristic degree of emotion at the news," Hazel said. "Oh my God, you guys. He cleared his throat," Everly said with a sigh. That was an uncharacteristic display of emotion for Mr. Calloway. He was kind of a hard ass, but I didn't mind. He was fair, and that mattered to me more than friendliness. And he loved his wife like crazy, so I knew he had a heart in there somewhere. "No wonder he was in such a good mood when he came into the office," I said. "He nodded to me when he walked by my desk." "That was nice of him," Everly said with a smile, then turned to Hazel. "How's the new house? Are you getting settled?" Hazel adjusted her glasses. "It's quite satisfactory." "Have you broken in the dining table yet?" Nora raised her eyebrows. "We've had several meals there, yes." The corner of Nora's mouth lifted. "That's not what I meant." "Nora," Everly's cheeks flushed pink. What? It's a fair question. We all know what's beneath Corbin's nerdy exterior. She has a point, I said. I just want to know if he's bent her over any tables lately. Hazel seemed to be trying to hide her smile. We're thoroughly enjoying our new house, including the dining table. Nora smiled. That's my girl. Sophie, how was the gala on Saturday? Everly asked. Thank you so much for going in our place. It was kind of a disaster, but that's not your fault. Oh no, what happened? I took a deep breath and launched into my story, from realizing I'd forgotten to wear panties, to Dr. Hansy Perv, to Ruby and Marcus and their offer of a cocaine-fueled threesome. Oh dear God, Nora said. What an absolute nightmare. You actually used bedsheets to climb from a second-story balcony? Hazel asked. You must have impressive upper body strength. I flexed one bicep. I have been working out. I also had help getting down, except... Except what? Everly asked. I took another deep breath. Circle of trust. My friends nodded and clasped hands, creating a circle. We all squeezed, then let go. The circle was sacred. What was said in the circle stayed in the circle. It was one of the many reasons I loved them so much. At first, I didn't think there was anyone in the courtyard, but of course there was, and because it's me and I have the worst luck in the history of ever, it wasn't just anyone. It was Camden Cox. I think I've heard of him, Hazel said. So have I. He's a delicious piece of man candy in a suit, Nora said. And you weren't wearing underwear. Please tell me this story ends with a hot hookup. I pulled a face. No, oh my God, no, never. You don't understand. I know him, or I used to know him, and it's not like he remembered me, the big jerk. How do you know him? Hazel asked. He lived on my street for a while when I was a kid, and we went to school together. It was around 5th grade, I think. He moved a few years later, but I'll never forget Camden Cox. He tormented me. I was a chubby little girl with curly blonde hair, so of course he called me Miss Piggy. He'd hold his nose up to make a pig snout and oink at me, and he'd come up behind me and pull my pigtails. That little snot, Nora said. Right? And honestly, how does this kind of thing always happen to me? It's not enough that I forget to wear underwear. I have to wind up hanging off a second-story balcony with my hoo-ha in the breeze while my childhood bully sees everything under my skirt. It was nice of him to help you down, though, Everly said. I pressed my lips closed. I didn't want to admit it, but he had been perfectly nice to me. Not nice enough to redeem him from being awful to our Sophie, Nora said, or for looking up her skirt. Thank you, I said with a nod, although the looking up my skirt part wasn't really his fault. I'm glad you weren't injured, Hazel said, and I commend your decision to decline the drugs and sex with a married couple. That wouldn't have ended well. I shuddered. Definitely not my thing. And let's not forget we have Vegas to look forward to, Nora said. We did have Vegas to look forward to. Mr. Calloway had to be in Vegas over the upcoming weekend on business, and Everly wanted company, so she'd invited the rest of us to tag along. I'd probably have to work some of the time, but I didn't mind one bit. It was going to be so much fun. I know Vegas with a pregnant lady isn't exactly the same, Everly said, resting a hand on her belly. We'll have plenty of fun, Nora said. We don't have to party like a bunch of 21-year-olds to have an amazing Vegas weekend. It's going to be fabulous, I said. We chatted more about our plans for the weekend, spa treatments, time by the pool, maybe a little gambling, and lots of good food. I couldn't wait. After lunch, I said goodbye to my friends and walked back to my office. I took off my coat and sat at my desk. Time to catch up on my email. Steve, one of my coworkers, came back from lunch and set a pet boutique bag on his desk. He sat right across the aisle from me, and he was one of my favorite people here. He'd been so helpful in showing me the ropes when I'd first started, and now we chatted all the time. Today, he was dressed in a brown button-down shirt with a sweater vest and brown slacks. It was a lot of brown, but that was Steve. What he lacked in fashion sense, he made up for in niceness and an unexpected sense of humor. "Did you buy a present for Millie?" I asked, gesturing to the bag. Steve was sort of a crazy cat lady, except a guy, and he only had one cat. But Millie was very important to him, even though she was basically the meanest cat I'd ever heard of. "I did. I'm hoping these new toys give her something else to do in the evenings when I'm trying to eat dinner." "Does she try to steal your food?" "No, she doesn't like human food, but she jumps on my shoulder and puts her tail in my face." By tail in his face, I was pretty sure he meant butt in his face. Gross. "Doesn't Millie weigh like 20 pounds? He shrugged. "More or less." "Doesn't it hurt?" "Her claws are quite sharp, yes." He said that in the same pleasant tone someone might have used to comment on the nice weather we'd been having. Well, I hope the new cat toys do the trick. My desk phone rang, so I picked it up. "Shepherd Calloway's office, this is Sophie." "Hello, Sophie. My name's Oliver Carrington," the voice on the other end said, and I smiled at his charming British accent. "I'm with Camden Cox's office." My smile disappeared, and my stomach did a belly flop. Camden Cox? Why was someone from his office calling here? "Hi, Oliver. What can I do for you?" "I was hoping you'd ask that. There's something quite important you can do for me. Mr. Cox would like to set up a meeting with Mr. Calloway as soon as his schedule allows." It was hard not to giggle at his pronunciation of the word schedule. So cute. "What is this regarding?" "A potential investment opportunity." Unfortunately, I had bad news for him. Mr. Calloway rarely took a meeting that he didn't ask for himself, and he'd asked me to keep his calendar more open than usual in case Everly needed him. "I'm sorry, Oliver, but Mr. Calloway's schedule is very tight. I really don't think I can fit anything in." "That's a terrible disappointment. Are you sure?" "I'm afraid so." Give me a moment, darling. I'm trying to come up with a suitable bribe." I laughed. "Who are you trying to bribe, me or Mr. Calloway?" "You, of course." "In that case, I love chocolate-covered strawberries." "Consider it done." I laughed again. I wish it were that easy, but there's not much I can do. He's totally booked. "You're a tough nut to crack, aren't you, Sophie? I'm mildly daunted by your superb gatekeeping abilities." "It's a big part of my job." "I can sympathize, but I won't give up quite so easily. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon, darling. I'll be in touch." "But Oliver, I really—" He hung up. With a soft laugh, I hung up the phone. About an hour later, Nina, our receptionist, brought a delivery to my desk. It was a small black box tied with a red ribbon. "What's this?" I asked as she set it down. "I don't know. Someone dropped it off. There's an envelope with your name on it." "Thanks, Nina." She went back to her desk, and I pulled the envelope out from under the ribbon. It simply said Sophie on the back. Inside, it read, "Dearest Sophie, I hope this little gift encourages you to find a single hour in your boss's undoubtedly crowded schedule. There's more where this came from. All my love, Oliver Carrington." I opened the box to find a decadent array of fresh strawberries dipped in chocolate. White chocolate with a milk chocolate drizzle, milk chocolate, dark chocolate, and a few that had little sprinkles or chopped nuts. They looked delicious. "Soph, do you have an admirer?" Steve asked, glancing at the open box from across the aisle. "No, nothing like that. Do you want one?" He smiled. "If you don't mind sharing." "Not at all." He came over to my desk and chose a milk chocolate strawberry dipped in coconut flakes. After he left, I eyed the rest, trying to decide what to do. On the one hand, I didn't particularly want to do any favors for Camden Cox, although he had helped me off that balcony, and it was probably silly to be mad about something that had happened 20 years ago when we were kids. And the fact that Oliver had actually sent chocolate-covered strawberries was, well, it was kind of hilarious and a little bit outrageous, and definitely made my afternoon. I'd see what I could do. I didn't think I'd be successful, but at least I could call Oliver back and let him know I'd tried my best. Mr. Calloway was in his office, the door ajar, not closed, so I got up and poked my head in. He looked up and raised his eyebrows. That meant it was fine to come in, so I did. I have a strange relationship with my boss. Because I'm such good friends with Everly, I see him socially sometimes. That man is stoic, and although I couldn't call him friendly, he is pleasant enough to be around. But at work, he's all business. He doesn't talk to me very much, just expects me to do my job and do it well, which I do, so things work out fine. Sorry to bother you, but Camden Cox's office called earlier. Mr. Cox would like to set up a meeting. Regarding... Surprised by his answer, I stumbled over my words a little. I'd expected him to say no, without any further questions. It was... a potential investment opportunity. With his attention still on his computer screen, he clicked his mouse. When? He said as soon as your schedule allows. I swiped through his calendar on my phone. You don't really have any openings in the next several weeks. What about in Vegas? Well, there's about a 30-minute window after your morning meeting on Saturday. Everly will still be at the spa. That works. Okay, I'll let them know. I went back to my desk, pleased that I could call Oliver with good news. Or partially good news. I didn't know if a 30-minute window in Las Vegas on Saturday was quite what Camden Cox was after, but it was better than a hard no. Now it was time to enjoy my little bribe. Chapter 4. Sophie. A kid on a bike rode down the sidewalk as I pulled up outside my dad's house. The grass in front of his 2-story craftsman was getting long. I'd have to see if his neighbor's teenage son would mow it for him again. I wished I could just hire a landscaping service, but I wasn't in a position to afford it. I should have been in a position to afford it, but that was another story. I grabbed the groceries I'd picked up after work and went to the front door, then knocked a few times to let him know I was here. Hey, Dad, I said, poking my head inside. You decent? His gravelly voice came from the kitchen. Depends. I went in and shut the door behind me. Depends on what? Who's here? It's just me. Then, yeah, I'm decent enough. I took the groceries to the kitchen and set them on the counter. Dad sat at the table, his hair damp, dressed in a dark blue robe and plaid slippers. The deep lines around his eyes and across his forehead crinkled as he hunched over a crossword puzzle. His gaze lifted as I started putting groceries away. I already ordered groceries this week. I know, I just grabbed a few extra things I thought you might like. He narrowed his eyes at me. There better not be any kale. I laughed. No, you've made your feelings about kale extremely clear. It's a fucking scam. Goddamn kids trying to say everyone has to eat kale or they'll die of a fucking heart attack. It's not a miracle food. Now bacon, there's a miracle food. I held up a package of bacon, and look what I have here. That's my girl. He put his pencil down and slowly stood. Watching him try to get around tugged at my heartstrings. Once upon a time, Melvin Abbott had been a tough-as-nails dock worker and fisherman with a barrel chest, tree-trunk thighs, and hands that were as big as my face. But a lifetime of hard physical work had left its mark. He'd needed 3 major surgeries in the last 10 years, and none of them had been able to fully repair the nerve damage that had left his legs half useless. But because he was Melvin Abbott, the most stubborn man on the planet, he still walked. Out of necessity, he'd finally given in and gotten a cane. I had a feeling he'd need to graduate to a walker soon. That was a fight I wasn't looking forward to. He'd tried to punch the last doctor who'd told him he was headed for a wheelchair. Dad, I've got it. You don't have to get up. I need to make my dinner. Don't be silly. Let me fix you something while I'm here. He made a grumbling noise in his throat. Don't you try to sneak anything green in my food. I stifled a laugh. Although I denied it, I hid vegetables in his food all the time. Okay, Dad, nothing green, promise. He grumbled again, and I heard the clunk of his cane as he slowly made his way out to the living room. A couple of minutes later, he turned the TV on. With a glance over my shoulder to make sure he couldn't see me from where he was sitting, I pulled a butternut squash out of one of the bags. He hadn't said anything about not sneaking something orange in his food. Besides, he actually loved vegetables. He was just too stubborn to admit it. Humming to myself, I made dinner for both of us. I ate here with him once or twice a week. My apartment was only a few minutes away, so I could come over and check up on him. Although he'd lived alone since I was in college, I worried about him, and not just because he had a hard time getting around. I didn't want him to be lonely. Mom had died when I was little, and he'd never remarried. In fact, he still wore his wedding ring. When I finished cooking, I brought our plates out to the living room. He sat in his old recliner with his feet propped up. A blanket and pillow were heaped in a pile next to his chair, and a little side table was cluttered with prescription bottles, reading glasses, pencils that needed sharpening, folded up newspapers, and a stack of crossword puzzle books. My eyes lingered on the blankets and pillow, and there was that tug on my heart again. "Have you been sleeping down here again?" He waved off my question.
"It's fine. My chair is more comfortable anyway."
I handed him his plate. "Dad, you can't keep sleeping in your recliner." The lines in his forehead creased.
"Why not?"
"Because it's not a bed."
"So?"
Careful not to dump my dinner in my lap, I gently lowered myself onto the couch. "So if you can't go up the stairs, we really need to talk about finding you a new place to live."
"No."
"Dad."
"No, my house is fine."
I let it drop for the time being. I knew it was more complicated than simply finding him a new house. It had to be something he could afford, and with housing prices being what they were around here, that was a lot easier said than done, but he really needed a place without stairs. We ate our dinner in silence for a few minutes, the only sound the low hum of the TV. He didn't mention the presence of the butternut squash in his meal. Either I'd hidden it adequately or he actually liked it.
"You know Mike, who lives next door?"
he asked, interrupting the quiet. "I think so."
"He had someone clean his gutters the other day. Pressure washed the house, too. His card is over there on the mantel."
He gestured with his fork. I didn't know if he was telling me this for a reason or just making conversation. "That's nice. Do you think your house needs to be pressure washed? Because I think it's probably fine."
"No, I thought you could go out with him."
"With who?"
"I told you, his card's on the mantel."
I let out a long sigh. "Please tell me you didn't set me up with the guy who cleaned your neighbor's gutters."
"I said you'd call him."
"Dad, I'm not going to call him."
"Why the hell not?"
"Because I don't want to call some random guy who was working on your neighbor's house."
"He agrees with me about Kale."
"Oh, then he must be the man of my dreams."
"He might be. Just take his card."
He took another bite.
"Unless you're dating the doctor. What's his name?"
"Dr. Dr. Schilling, and no, definitely not." Dad shrugged.
"He was kind of an ass."
My mouth dropped open. "Then why did you set me up with him?"
"I'm just throwing fucking spaghetti at the wall, Soph. One of these days, something's gonna stick."
"I don't know if that's the best approach to dating." He shoveled the last of his dinner into his mouth. I got up and took both our plates to the kitchen, only dropping one fork. I cleaned up the dishes and checked to make sure he didn't need refills on any of his prescriptions. When I went into the living room again, he was back at it with a crossword puzzle. He'd read once that they could help prevent dementia, so now he worked on them daily. "I'm going to head home. Oh, and don't forget, I'm going out of town for a few days. If you need me to pick up anything before I go, let me know."
"Where are you going?"
"Las Vegas."
"Why the hell would you go there?"
I laughed. "For work. And my friends are all coming too. We're making a little trip out of it." He held me in a skeptical stare.
"Your friends are all going?"
"Yep, Nora is coming, and so are Hazel and Corbin. Not for work, of course. They're just coming for fun."
"Well, you probably won't get into too much trouble then."
"Of course not. What kind of trouble could we get into?" He raised his eyebrows. "I know, it's Vegas, But Everly's pregnant, so it's going to be really low-key. We're going to the spa and maybe to a show or something." He grunted and adjusted his reading glasses.
Just be careful.
"I will. You don't need to worry about me."
The day I stop worrying about you is the day I go into the ground.
"Thanks, Dad. That's sweet, but very morbid." And there really wasn't anything he needed to worry about. Sure, Mr. Calloway had a meeting with Camden Cox, but I probably wouldn't have to see him. And even if I did, I could handle it. The man had pulled my pigtails when we were kids, and he'd seen up my dress at the fundraiser, but... Okay, when I thought about it like that, maybe this Vegas trip wasn't such a great idea. But it was too late to back out now. Besides, I only had to work part of the time, and the rest would be all fun with my friends. The worst that could happen is I'd run into Camden Cox. Even with my luck, how bad could it really be?
Chapter 5. Cox. A last-minute trip to Vegas wasn't ideal, but when Oliver had told me that was the best he could do with Calloway, I decided to take it. Besides, I loved Vegas. I'd do some business, then see what kind of trouble I could find in Sin City. I'd arrived at the conference room a few minutes early. I wasn't nervous in the traditional sense of the word, but I did have a steady pulse of energy moving through me. I needed to make this deal happen. Shepard Calloway came in wearing a dark suit and tie. I noted the hard set of his jaw, the focus in his blue eyes, and the wedding ring that glinted on his finger. Although we'd never officially met, we moved in the same circles, and his reputation preceded him. I stood and adjusted the cuffs of my sleeves. We shook hands and made the necessary introductions. And then she rushed in behind him. Tension crawled up my spine, tightening my back in a wave. A surprising rush of pressure hit my groin so fast I almost grunted from the force of it.
"Mr. Calloway, I'm sorry, but you left your phone."
Her soft blonde curls were pulled up, and she wore a dark blue wrap dress that showcased her delicious curves. She held out a phone to Calloway, and her eyes darted toward me, then back, like she was trying not to make eye contact. "Thank you." Calloway took the phone from her. Why was she here? Did she work for him? I'd never been jealous of another man in my life, but in that moment I seethed with envy. He got to spend every day with her? With my Sophia? Only she wasn't mine in any sense of the word, and the truth of that lit a flare of anger in my gut. "You're welcome." Her eyes flicked to me again. "Sorry to interrupt. I just thought you'd want it." He slipped his phone into his pocket and gave her a nod, effectively dismissing her. "She can stay," I blurted out, then tried not to visibly flinch. Why had I said that? If Calloway thought my statement was odd, he gave no indication. "If you don't mind, Sophie." Sophie? Was that a term of endearment? Calloway was married, but what sort of man was he? And why the fuck did I care? Her eyes widened and she fidgeted with her hand back. "Oh, yes, I can. Sure, no problem." "My assistant, Sophie Abbott," Calloway said by way of introduction, then smoothly took a seat at the table. Maybe that was simply her name. Had I misheard the other night? Sophie took a hesitant step, tentatively reaching for a chair, but teetered on her heels like she was about to fall. I quickly moved in and grabbed her elbow to steady her. That put me close enough to smell her hair, and it took a supreme effort of willpower to keep from visibly sniffing her. God, she smelled good. It made me wonder what she tasted like. "Nice to see you again," I said. A pink flush hit her cheeks, and she slowly lifted her eyes, looking at me through thick lashes. "Hi, you too." "You know each other?" Calloway asked, a hint of suspicion in his tone. Sophie pulled her arm away and wobbled on her heels again, but managed to get herself into her chair. "Yes, no. We sort of ran into each other last weekend. It wasn't a big deal." I loved that I'd flustered her, and I couldn't help but bring to mind the sight of her hanging off that balcony. I merely helped her out of a precarious situation. Calloway eyed me as I took my seat, but didn't ask any more questions. Was he protective of her? Why? And once again, why did I care? I needed to focus on why I was here. I had far too much riding on this project to let a woman, even one who smelled that good, get in my head. Thank you for taking the time to meet with me. I assume we're here to talk about the Skyline project, he said. You did your research. He nodded once. Sophie quietly produced a notebook and pen out of her handbag and sat poised to take notes. Her gaze was on the table, not on me, but I caught her eyes lifting for a quick peek before she looked down again. Sophie Abbott. Why was that name tickling at my memory? I cleared my throat and slid a packet with the project specs across the table. The Skyline project follows the lead of Lincoln Square in Bellevue, only we're taking it further. 3 buildings connected by sky bridges with a mix of condominiums, a high-end hotel, and retail and restaurant space. We've already secured the land and permitting is in process. Calloway thumbed through the papers. What's the timeline? A conservative estimate is 2 years to opening, but it could be faster. The city is being unusually cooperative because of the potential for tax revenue. This neighborhood is in serious need of revitalization. Skyline would change everything in a 5-block radius at least, and Phase 2 would include affordable housing options. The design looks good. He flipped to another page. Modern without being garish. Exactly. We're going for classic and sophisticated, a place people want to frequent. I waited, my eyes strained to Sophie while Calloway looked through the information I'd provided. Her dress crisscrossed her chest, dipping low in the center, revealing smooth skin. What would it feel like to bury my face in those tits? Hike up that dress and grab her ass while she sank down on my cock. A tendril of blonde hair brushed the side of her neck. I wanted to curl it around my finger while I licked her neck and bit. What's the story with Dominic Coates? Calloway's voice jolted me back to reality. I liked his directness. He could have asked why I was looking for new investors at this stage, but we both knew. He didn't need to beat around the bush. You've done your research, so I assume you saw the press coverage. I did, but press coverage is usually bullshit. True, although what they reported was correct. Apparently, he had an affinity for snorting drugs off hookers' asses. If I'd known, I wouldn't have partnered with him to begin with. Calloway met my eyes. You wouldn't have? That was a surprising question. What the fuck did he care if I did business with a piece of shit who paid for sex? If you have any concerns about me, I can assure you that's not how I spend my free time. Who I associate with matters. His eyes bored into me, sizing me up. And not just because of the money. Interesting. A man of both wealth and principle. Agreed. Which is why I called you. This has potential, he said, closing the folder. Revitalization, job creation, not to mention the real estate's increase in value when the project is complete. I need to do more research, but I'm interested. I let a small smile steal across my lips. Excellent. My office can provide you with anything you need. Good. He turned toward Sophie. Put a note in my calendar to follow up on the Skyline project next week. Already done, she said. Calloway stood and I followed. We shook hands across the table. He'd been straight to the point, no bullshit. I appreciated that. We'll be in touch. Sophie got up, juggling her belongings for a few seconds before seeming to find her balance. There was something strangely delightful about her. And why did she seem so familiar? It wasn't because we'd met the other night. There was something else, and it was driving me crazy that I couldn't figure it out. Calloway started to leave, then paused to wait for Sophie. She tried to deposit her notepad and pen in her handbag, but wound up dropping both. I rushed around the table and crouched to retrieve them for her right as she did the same, and our foreheads collided. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. She stood and rubbed her forehead, leaving her things on the ground. I picked them up and handed them to her, heedless of the slight pain from her head knocking into mine. Her scent wafted over me, leaving me dumbstruck. What was it about this girl? Thanks, Mr. Cox. She tucked her things into her handbag and straightened her shoulders. Just Cox. Right. Cox. With a little nod, she turned and left with Calloway. I watched her leave, once again mesmerized by the hypnotic sway of her hips and the bounce of her curls. Why was she so entrancing? A simple physical attraction to her didn't explain it. Or did it? I'd been on a dating hiatus for several months. Women always wound up being more trouble than they were worth. But maybe it was time to have a woman in my bed again. Specifically that woman. Sophie Abbott. Wait, why did I know that name? I sat down, my eyes still lingering on the door she'd gone through. Did I know her from somewhere? She certainly wasn't someone I'd known recently, I'd remember. She'd recognized me at the hotel after I'd helped her down from the balcony. I hadn't thought much about that. I was recognized in public occasionally, but was there another reason she knew who I was? I searched my memory, thinking back further to girls I'd known in college, then high school. She couldn't have been one of the girls I'd dated casually in my teens or 20s. And then it hit me. Curly blonde pigtails and round cheeks, a girl named Sophie Abbott had lived on my street. We must have been 11 or 12. Holy shit, was that her? It had to be. And it explained everything. The first girl who'd ever given me a boner was Sophie Abbott. And now look at her. Who knew round-cheeked little girls could grow up to be all that? I indulged in a self-satisfied smile. The deal with Shepard Calloway was as good as done, and Sophie Abbott didn't know it yet, but she was going to make my earliest fantasy come true. That fantasy, only dirtier.
Chapter 6. Sophie. Amazing dress? Check. Fabulous hair and makeup thanks to Nora? Check. The bright lights of Vegas? Check. Panties? Double check. Not that I was wearing 2 pairs of panties, just that I'd checked twice before leaving my room to make sure I was, in fact, wearing them. I was. Actually, today had been a surprisingly good luck sort of day. At least it had been since Mr. Calloway's meeting with Camden Cox. That had been less than ideal, although not the total disaster it could have been. All I'd done was almost trip once and then drop my pen and notepad. Okay, so I'd basically headbutted him while we were both going for my pen, but it hadn't even left a red spot, much less a bruise. I was totally fine. I was firmly not thinking about the way it had felt to have his strong hand steadying me when I'd wobbled on my heels, and since then I'd been completely disaster-free. Now I sat with my friends in a swanky Las Vegas restaurant, feeling like a hottie in this deep purple dress, sipping a delicious martini. We'd been to the spa this afternoon for facials and manicures, then back to my room to change and get ready for dinner. That was where Nora's handiwork had come in. She'd transformed me from cute but boring Sophie to Vegas Vixen Sophie. I liked being Vegas Vixen Sophie. It was fun. Corbin and Mr. Calloway sat at a nearby table, tolerating each other's company, in a rather adorable attempt to give us girls the illusion that they weren't hovering over their wives. Not that any of us minded. They weren't intrusive, and the way they cast protective and longing glances at our table was just too cute. I loved that Hazel and Everly were both so radiantly happy, even if it did remind me of my own failures in love. Everly yawned, and Mr. Calloway scooted to the edge of his seat, as if poised to swoop in and gather up his wife in his arms, should she need him. "Sorry," Everly said. "I get tired so early these days." "That's a perfectly normal consequence of pregnancy," Hazel said. "I'm rather surprised you've made it this long without needing a nap." "Does that mean you won't be disappointed if I turn in early?" "Of course we won't," Nora said. "Besides, if you don't go back to your room soon, your husband might give himself an aneurysm." Everly laughed. I know, he's so intense. And we love him for it. Hazel's eyes darted to Corbin again. Oh my God, will you two stop eye-fucking? Nora said. Both of you, go. I wasn't, Hazel started to say, then stopped herself. There's just something about hotel rooms for us. I tried not to giggle as I watched Corbin chew on his lower lip, his eyes locked on his wife. They were so obvious. Go, Nora said, brushing them away with a flick of her hand. Go have hot hotel sex. I'm completely happy for you and not the least bit jealous. I'm jealous, I said. I am too, obviously. I'm just trying to be nice. Everly stood, and a second later, Mr. Calloway was at her side. Hazel got up and shot Corbin a look that dripped with suggestion. The corners of his mouth lifted, and he stood, shoving his hands in his pants pockets. They both walked away in different directions, clearly beginning a game that only they understood. I guess this is growing up, Nora said wistfully as we watched our friends go. Best friends with husbands and babies on the way. Things change, I said, and I think it's normal to be both happy and sad about that. Well said, Soph. She stood and shouldered her purse. I think tonight I'm going to embrace that change and turn in early. I followed, careful not to knock my chair over. Are you sure? Yeah, to be honest, I didn't sleep well last night. Pajamas and hotel sheets sound decadent right about now, but I don't want to ruin your night. Would you rather go out? No, I'm fine. We had fun last night, and it's been a long day for me, too. I like where you're going with pajamas and hotel sheets. She and I walked to the elevators together. Her room was on the 38th floor, so she got out first. I stayed in, and the elevator rose, opening on the 39th. I hesitated, and a moment later the doors closed again with me still inside, because I didn't really want to go back to my room. I was in Vegas, feeling awesome in this dress, and I'd had so much good luck today. My shoes fit right, my hair was behaving itself, and I hadn't tripped or fallen even once since that meeting earlier. I'd gotten through dinner without spilling a single thing, and that had to be some kind of record. I didn't want to waste this good luck, especially not here. With a sense of resolve, I pushed the button to go back down. We were staying at the Four Seasons, so decadent, and since I was alone, I decided to stick close and go to Mandalay Bay. The noise and lights of the casino greeted me, a cacophony of beeping machines, background music, and conversations. Clutching my purse in my hands, I took slow steps, trying to get my bearings. It was loud and bright and exciting, and I was going to make the most of it. A slot machine seemed like a good place to start. I chose one of the smaller ones, took the seat in front of it, and fed in some money. The screen flashed, and I hit the button. A little thrill of excitement tingled my stomach as I watched the symbols scroll until... Wait. I won. I didn't win much, but I'd won a few dollars. Go me. Time to play again. I hit the button, and the screen flashed. I won. Again. How was this possible? I glanced around, wishing I had someone to celebrate with. I never won anything, and I'd just won twice in a row. Positive that I'd lose this time, I played again, and I freaking won. This one was a bigger payout, $20, and the machine celebrated for me with flashing lights and music. An old lady walking by gave me a big thumbs up. I smiled and waved back at her. Okay, now I was on a roll. I pressed the button, and this time I didn't win. Still, the little tingle of excitement in my stomach grew. This was fun. I touched it again, just to see what would happen. Winner! I squealed, bouncing in my seat. This was so cool. Way to go, Goldilocks, someone said behind me. I twisted in my seat to wave at them when, just like that, my luck ran out. My smile melted. Why was he here? Well, probably to gamble. We were in Vegas, after all. But the last person I wanted to see tonight was Cox. his mouth hooked in a smile that made me feel like a little fish who'd just come face to face with a shark. My tummy did a flip, because damn it, he was so gorgeous. It was terribly unfair. And then it hit me. He wasn't looking at me. Camden Cox was not going to stare me down with that kind of predatory gleam in his eyes, even if Nora had turned me into Vegas vixen Sophie. I was still Sophie Abbott, and men like him weren't interested in women like me. There must be a bombshell in a slinky black dress nearby. That's who he was looking at. I glanced around, curious to see the woman who'd caught his eye, but the only people around me were a gray-haired couple wearing matching pink Hawaiian shirts with little palm trees on them, and a man with a sizable beer gut and gray chest hair poking out his partially open collar. Cox walked straight toward me, looking stupidly hot in his button-down shirt, vest, and slacks. He'd taken off his tie, cuffed his sleeves, and left the top 2 shirt buttons undone. And why was that so sexy on a man? Except he was Camden Cox, childhood tormentor. "Sophie Abbott," he said, his hint of a southern drawl as smooth as melted chocolate. "Are you perhaps the same Sophie Abbott who once lived on Ashford Street?" Oh my God, did he remember me? That's me. "You recognized me at the hotel last weekend, from back then." You're kind of hard to forget. His mouth hooked in a slow grin. "As are you. I seem to recall blonde pigtails." I'm not surprised. You used to yank them. He lifted his eyebrows and his hand twitched, like maybe he was going to pull my hair right now. And no, I didn't want him to. Much. "Did I?" "Yes, you were very mean to me." He chuckled, and I wasn't sure if it was because he didn't believe me that he'd been mean, or that he remembered it and thought it was funny. "I'm sorry, did I interrupt a winning streak?" I couldn't help the way the corners of my mouth lifted in a smile. "Yeah, I actually won a few times." "Congratulations. I hope that's a sign of good things to come tonight." "I have been unusually lucky today." He smiled again, and there was that predatory gleam in his eyes. The nervous fluttering in my stomach made me feel like I could jump right out of my seat. That wouldn't be good. Knowing me, I'd land on my ass. "Then by all means," he gestured to the slot machine. I was totally positive that he'd already brought my lucky streak to a grinding halt just by being here. But when the symbols stopped flashing, I'd won. I'd actually freaking won. I bounced in my seat and gave myself a little round of applause. Cox smiled down at me, his hand still resting on the back of the chair. "That was fun." It was fun, and maybe I could admit it was a tiny bit more fun with someone to celebrate with me, even if that someone was Camden Cox. "This calls for a drink." He waved his hand, as if he were flagging someone down. "I think the bar is over—" Before I could finish, someone from the casino appeared, as if he'd been lingering nearby, waiting to do Cox's bidding. "What can I do for you, Mr. Cox?" "A Glenfiddich for me, and whatever the lady wants." "Oh, a martini, I guess? Dirty. Thank you." He nodded and left to get our drinks. I wasn't sure why Cox wanted to stand here and watch me play a slot machine, but that thought soon flitted away on the wings of more wins and the appearance of a martini in my hand. I didn't win every time, but I won more than I lost. It was all I could do to keep from spilling my drink. After yet another win, Cox gently tugged on my elbow. "Sugar, you're on fire. Come on, let's up the stakes." I stood, only wobbling a little, and he held my arm to keep me steady. Up the stakes? His hand slid around to my lower back. "Absolutely. We can't waste this kind of luck." "But I don't worry," he said, and his voice was so reassuring. "It'll be fun." More fun. That was why I was here, wasn't it? With his hand on the small of my back, he led me to one of the craps tables. I had no idea how to play, but I figured how hard could it be? Place some bets, roll some dice. Craps turned out to be even better than a slot machine. Cox explained the basics, and after the first few rolls, I started to get the hang of it. A well-dressed couple joined us, and pretty soon we were the liveliest table in the casino. The dealer pushed the dice toward me, and I picked up 2, then clutched them in my fist and blew on them for luck. I tossed them onto the table. They hit the back and bounced, coming to a stop to a chorus of cheers. I was on fire. Someone handed me a shot of whiskey. Cox held his up, and we clinked our glasses together. "To a magical night," he said with a wink. "I'll drink to that." I swallowed the shot, feeling the bite as it slid down my throat. I wasn't normally a whiskey girl, but whatever that was, it was good. So smooth. "All right, sugar." Cox took my shot glass. "Let's see some more magic." I rolled the dice again, and everyone at the table won. My arms flew overhead as I cheered. When had I stepped out of my shoes? I glanced down at the floor. They were right there, one tipped over on its side, and that didn't seem to matter very much right now. Who cared if I was barefoot? Cox swept my hair back over my shoulder, his fingers brushing my neck. The light touch sent a tingle down my spine. "Not pulling my hair now, are you, Cox?" I asked. The corner of his mouth twitched. "No, indeed." "I guess I'm easier to like when I'm your lucky charm." "You're the one doing all the winning, sugar. I'm just along for the ride." Giggling, I poked his chest. That's what she said. The next couple of hours went by in a haze of winning, cheering, and celebrating. And drinking. I lost track of how many chips I had. They seemed to be multiplying, which I suppose they were because I kept winning. I also lost track of how many shots I took. Cox's hand slipped around my waist, and I had a feeling that wasn't something in his pocket when he pressed himself close to celebrate my latest winning throw. I glanced up at him, meeting his eyes. The room spun, and in the back of my mind, I knew I was trucking right past buzzed and heading straight for drunk. But I didn't care. I felt wild and uninhibited, unstoppable. I was the luckiest girl in Vegas, and this was going to be the best night of my life.
Chapter 7. Cox. The insides of my eyelids felt like sandpaper scraping across my eyeballs. The beginnings of a headache radiated from my temples, and my mouth tasted like something had died in there. Holy shit, what had I done to myself last night? I hadn't partied that hard in years. Blinking, I glanced around to get my bearings. Where the fuck was I? Sprawled face down on a king bed in a hotel suite. Naked. Where were my clothes, and why wasn't I wearing them? The previous night was a haze. I couldn't remember how I'd gotten here, and this wasn't my room. I wasn't even sure if this was my hotel. I shifted enough to reach the nightstand. The notepad next to the lamp had the Bellagio logo. Definitely not my hotel. And what had happened to Sophie? Had she come with me? Or had I lost her somewhere last night? Fuck. I bolted to my feet, making my head throb. A low thud, followed by a soft ouch, came from the other room. That seemed to answer my question, and the sudden spike of alarm eased. She was here. I grabbed a towel from the bathroom and held it over my crotch. Then I pushed open the bedroom door. Sophie knelt on the couch facing away from me, wearing nothing but a white sheet that she'd wrapped around herself. She was bent over with her head resting on the back of the couch and had one arm draped behind it, like she was trying to retrieve something. She wasn't wearing clothes. Had I fucked her last night? For an agonizing moment, I searched my memory, desperate to recall. There had to be something, anything, because if I'd fucked Sophie Abbott and been too drunk to remember, that was a goddamn tragedy. How could I not remember? Maybe she did. Not that I was going to come out and ask. That would be a blow to my manhood. Hey, sugar, do you by chance remember if we fucked last night? How was it? No, I'd just play it cool and wait for her to tell me how great it had been, or maybe ask for more. I leaned against the door frame, still holding the towel over my growing erection. I didn't want to alarm her with it. If she wanted some of this, I was certainly in. It didn't do me any good to take a woman to bed and have no memory of it. If I had actually taken her to bed, and the way my cock ached made me wonder. "Morning." She let out a surprised squeak and straightened. Her hand clutched the sheet at her chest, and she very slowly turned her head to look at me. "Morning?" That hesitant, almost shocked expression wasn't what I'd expect from a woman I'd taken to Pound Town last night. So maybe we hadn't. Or maybe she didn't remember either. "Did you lose something behind the couch?" "My bra. At least I think it's my bra. There's a bra." Her blonde curls were matted down on one side of her head, and she had smears of makeup beneath her eyes. Somehow, that only made my dick harder. I wanted to think I'd messed up her hair, but it still wasn't coming back to me. "How did your bra get behind the couch?" "I'm not positive, but it might have had something to do with that." She pointed. I was clearly not awake yet. How had I missed the portable stripper pole in the center of the room? "Where did that come from?" "I'm not sure." Still clutching the sheet in a tight fist, she climbed off the couch. "Everything after we left Mandalay Bay is pretty hazy." I raked a hand through my hair. "Yeah, you're telling me." The room was a mess. Pillows littered the floor, and we'd apparently gotten late-night room service. A tray of half-eaten food sat on the floor in front of the fireplace. Our clothes were scattered around the room. I spotted one of her shoes beneath the coffee table, but the other was nowhere in sight. My shirt hung haphazardly from the corner of the wall-mounted TV, and her dress was a deep purple puddle next to the pole. And were those her panties dangling from the top of the curtain? She turned toward the window and seemed to see the same thing I did. "Oh my God." I was about to tell her not to worry about it, I'd get them down, but she dashed over to the window as if she could grab them before I realized what they were. Only her feet got tangled in the sheet and she face-planted on the floor with a thud. "I'm okay." She held up a hand to wave me off. I crouched next to her. "Are you sure?" She lifted her head. "Yeah, Her eyes went wide. Glancing down, I realized I'd dropped the towel and was kneeling in front of her with my morning erection just inches from her face. I jerked my hips back, trying to get it away from her. It was one thing if a woman wanted your dick in her face, quite another if she didn't. She snort-laughed, which was not the sort of response a guy wanted to a close-up of his manhood. "Sorry." She pushed herself up and managed to get to her feet. "I wasn't laughing at you. That's nothing to laugh at. In fact, it's very—" She stopped abruptly, pressing her lips closed. "Never mind." "It's very what? Hard? Thick when it's inside you? Satisfying? Tell me, Sophie." I grabbed the towel, stood, and wrapped it around my waist, trying to ignore the pressure in my groin. Sophie adjusted the sheet without giving me so much as a peek of what was underneath and went to the window to grab her panties. She had to jump, but she hooked them with a finger and got them down. "Okay, I'm just going to get dressed and go." She shuffled past me to the stripper pole and gathered up her dress. "I'll just leave the bra behind the couch. It's fine. Have you seen my other shoe? Maybe it's in the bedroom? That's okay. Do you mind if I use the bathroom? I'll be out of your way in a few minutes." I watched her, somewhat bewildered, while she grabbed her one shoe and quick-stepped into the bedroom. A second later, the bathroom door closed. What the fuck had we done last night? My head hurt and I was dehydrated as hell, so I grabbed a water out of the mini-fridge and took it to the couch. I sat, making sure the towel still covered my dick, since this hard-on wasn't going anywhere apparently, and chugged the water. There's a reason I didn't party like that anymore. I had a feeling I was going to be paying for it for at least the next 24 hours. The flight home was sure going to be fun. Sophie came out a few minutes later, her hair a little damp like she'd tried to wet it to get her curls to behave. with only marginal success. She'd found her other shoe, and she wore that curve-hugging purple dress that I'd spent last night fantasizing about taking off her. Had I? We'd both woken up naked. But why couldn't I remember?
I have to go, but thank you for...
Her foot banged into something, and she stumbled, but didn't fall this time.
What the...
She picked up a red sign with a big number 2 on both sides. An MMA organization's logo was at the bottom. That's right. We'd gone to a fight last night, and Sophie had...
Oh my God.
She dropped it like it was hot.
I thought that was a dream. Please tell me I wasn't one of the ring girls at an MMA fight.
My lip curled in a smile. It was hazy, but that part started coming back to me. You did. We were ringside, and you said you wanted to go up there with the girls next round.
So you flagged someone down and they handed me this.
But you didn't have a bikini, so you went up there in
my underwear?
She was so adorably mortified it was hard not to laugh. That was hot. And I seem to remember the crowd loving you.
Oh my God.
She covered her face with her hands.
I have to go.
Sophie, wait. She didn't. Just grabbed her purse off the floor and rushed out the door. I got up, holding the towel, and picked my way across the cluttered floor. I threw open the door, but she'd already disappeared around the corner. I was about to run after her when I realized I didn't have a room key. The last thing I needed right now was to get locked out wearing nothing but a towel. Stepping back, I caught the door with my heel before it clicked shut. Fuck, I muttered, looking both ways down the hall. She was gone. I waited another second because chances were she was running and she'd trip in her heels. But I didn't hear anything. Oddly disappointed that she was gone, I went back inside and used the bathroom. My boxer briefs were on the floor in the bedroom, so I tugged them on, then got another bottle of water and took it to the couch. At least I knew how to get in touch with her. Shepard Calloway's office. That was something. I took a long swig of water and looked around again. Wait a minute. There were pearly white balloons in one corner and a bouquet of white roses on the table. An open bottle of champagne stood next to a silver bucket. This was a honeymoon suite. Oh, fuck. I got up and tore around the mess, looking for the rest of my clothes. Where were my fucking pants? I finally found them near the front door. Apparently, I'd either shucked them as soon as we'd come in or tossed them in that direction when I'd taken them off. Impossible to tell which. There was something in the back pocket. Not cash. No chips or gambling winnings. Sophie had done all the winning last night, although I'd been prepared to fund her if she'd hit a losing streak just because watching her gamble had been so much fun. But something else tickled my memory. Something slightly less hazy than whatever had happened in this hotel suite last night. I pulled a folded piece of paper out of the back pocket. It was exactly what I thought. This was an absolute disaster. Because this time, what happened in Vegas wasn't staying there.
Chapter 8. Sophie. This wasn't just a walk of shame. This was a Vegas walk of shame. A dash down a hotel hallway in last night's dress with no bra, tottering on my high heels, hoping and praying I hadn't left anything important behind, walk of shame. Well, I had left something important behind. My dignity, or what little of it I had left after last night. This was such a disaster. The elevator doors opened, and something seemed off, but I couldn't place it. I got in and dug my room key out of my purse. Thankfully, everything seemed to be in there. My wallet, phone, room key, even my lipstick had survived my wild night. Under normal circumstances, I would have called that a tiny win and internally celebrated. It was expensive lipstick, but these weren't normal circumstances. I had my pointer finger all ready to press the button for my floor, but I stopped. Something was wrong. My room was on the 39th floor, but this elevator stopped at 36. What was going on? The elevator started to go down, but I hadn't pressed any buttons. Someone on a lower floor must have called it. My brain tried to assault me with fuzzy memories from last night, but I pushed them aside because I had no idea where I was. Was this even my hotel? For a second, I thought about going back to Cox's room, but I hadn't looked to see what number it was, and I really didn't want to face him again. Last night had been... I didn't even know. Vague memories flashed through my mind, but they were foggy and disjointed. I couldn't even be sure they were all real. My head pounded, throbbing to the beat of my heart, and my stomach was horribly raw. The elevator doors opened to the lobby, and a small group of travelers with rolling suitcases stepped aside so I could get out. I kept my eyes on the floor, not daring to meet their gazes. Could they tell what I'd been through? Did they know I'd just woken up naked with a man I barely knew and had only the vaguest, haziest memory of how I'd gotten there? Could they tell I wasn't wearing a bra? Probably, but really that was the least of my problems. One look at the lobby and I knew this was not my hotel. Somehow, I'd ended up at the Bellagio with Camden Cox, and I'd woken up naked. That probably meant I'd slept with him. Although I didn't remember sleeping with him, but I barely remembered coming to this hotel, so my memory was clearly unreliable. I'd made messes out of situations before, but this was some next-level mess-making. I took a deep breath and walked through the lobby. I was almost too distracted by my predicament to notice the incredible glass ceiling. Almost, but not quite. It looked like a glowing, multicolored garden, or maybe upside-down umbrellas. Either way, it was beautiful. But I needed to get out of here in case Cox followed me down. I cast a quick look over my shoulder, no sign of him, then made my way outside. Pausing to get my bearings, I pulled out my phone. I didn't know my way around the Strip very well, but I was pretty sure my hotel was too far to walk. I'd just check the map to be sure, then take a taxi. That seemed easiest.
Ma'am.
A limo driver wearing a tie and black jacket stood outside a sleek black limo. His name tag said J.J. Santiago. Was he talking to me? I glanced around, but he was definitely looking at me. Yes?
Do you need to go somewhere?
Oh, yes, but I'll just take a taxi. His brow furrowed.
Why would you take a taxi?
Well, no offense, but I don't think I need to rent a limo just to go a couple of miles back to my hotel. He chuckled softly.
Ma'am, I'm your driver. I can take you anywhere you need to go.
I gaped at him, fully aware that I must have looked as dumb as I felt. My driver? He opened the rear door.
It was dark last night, but I can assure you it was me. Come on.
I had a feeling "it was dark last night" was code for "I know you were too drunk to remember." And when I thought about it, I did have a vague recollection of being in a limo. Cox must have ordered it. Either that or I'd splurged with my winnings. "Thank you," I said, feeling sheepish. I started to get in, but changed my mind. "Can I ride up front with you? I just need to get to my hotel, and sitting back there with that huge seat all by myself seems excessive."
I'm not really supposed to, but I guess it won't hurt anything.
"Don't worry, I won't tell anyone." His mouth hooked in a grin, and his eyes flicked up and down. "Me neither." Well, thank goodness for that. He shut the rear door and opened the passenger door for me. I thanked him, idly hoping I'd actually gotten all the smeared mascara off my face. It was so bright out here in the daylight. I took a deep breath and smoothed out my dress while he got in and started the car.
Where to?
"Four Seasons," he nodded. "So sorry that I have to ask this, but this morning can't get any more humiliating than it already is, so why not? You were driving us around last night?"
Yes, ma'am.
"Why are you still here? Did you actually wait out there all night?" He pulled out of the hotel and into traffic.
Yeah, but I don't mind. Mr. Cox pays very well.
Oh, I fiddled with my purse. That's good. Do you, can you tell me where we went? He had the decency not to laugh at me.
I picked your party up outside Mandalay Bay.
That's familiar.
You made a couple of stops on the Strip, then T-Mobile Arena.
Right, the MMA thing.
Afterward, I took you to the Regional Justice Center, then back to the Strip. I'm afraid I can't tell you everywhere you went. I dropped you off at the Venetian and later picked you up at Circus Circus to take you to the Bellagio.
Wait, the Regional Justice Center? Why would we have gone there?
Uh-oh.
Back up, Sophie. There was something before that. You said you took my party. We were with a bunch of people, weren't we?
Yes, you were, until the end of the evening when I took you to the Bellagio. That was just you and Mr. Cox.
I nodded, still trying to put the pieces together. I remembered winning at Mandalay Bay. Then Drake Meadows, the lead singer for Monkey Rum, had showed up with his fiancée, an Instagram model named Marika. Drake was a legit rock star, and Cox had known him. They'd said it was their wedding day and invited us to come celebrate with them. That was how we'd wound up with a group of people in a limo leaving Mandalay Bay. Maybe that was why we'd gone to the Regional Justice Center, to get their marriage license. Except...
Here we are,
he said, and I realized we'd stopped outside the hotel. He got out and came around to open the door for me. Thank you so much. I opened my purse and rooted around for a tip.
Ma'am, there's no need, he said. That's been taken care of.
Oh, I met his eyes and smiled, feeling sheepish again. Thanks for being so nice and not judging me too much. He smiled back.
Don't worry, this is Vegas. Do you need me to wait?
No, you should probably go back to the Bellagio for Cox. I mean, Mr. Cox.
All right, enjoy the rest of your visit.
Thank you. Well, at least the ride of shame hadn't been too terrible. A very alarming thought tried to push its way to the front of my mind. Regional Justice Center? But I firmly pushed it back. I was mortified, exhausted, hungover, and hungry. I needed to process last night in bite-sized pieces. But first, I needed a shower. And I had just enough time before I was supposed to meet the girls for brunch. I'd go back to my room, my actual room in the right hotel, and get cleaned up. Regular clothes would help too. And then I'd see if I could figure out how big of a mess I'd made. The shower helped a little, as did normal clothes. In my pink top and fitted jeans, I was no longer Vegas vixen Sophie, just regular Sophie. My hair was even driving me crazy, like usual, the curls refusing to behave themselves. It was good to feel like myself again, although I was still jittery, too many unanswered questions flitting through my mind. And, of course, being me, I was late for brunch. I hurried to the restaurant, and the host led me to the table where Nora, Everly, and Hazel were already sipping drinks. Nora and Hazel had enormous Bloody Marys, and Everly's drink looked like tea, probably herbal. I'm so sorry I'm late. I plopped into my chair. No problem, Everly said with a smile. We've only ordered drinks. My head spun as I perused the menu. I had so many questions about last night, and although I knew my friends couldn't definitively answer them, I really needed their advice. The server came and took our orders. I just asked for coffee and whatever Nora was having. Are you okay, Soph? Nora asked after the server left. Yes. No, I'm not sure. I have a very important question. Okay. How do you know if you've had sex if you can't remember? All three of them stared at me for a few seconds. Wait, what? Nora asked. You're going to need to be more specific. Let's say, theoretically, a woman woke up naked with a man, but it's unclear whether or not they were naked because they'd slept together or because they just took their clothes off and fell asleep that way. I'm asking for a friend. Nora narrowed her eyes at me. Are you inquiring from the perspective of a third party? Hazel asked. In the situation you described, did the person attempting to determine whether sexual activity took place walk in and discover the unclothed couple? No, she's part of the unclothed couple. But why is it unclear whether they had sex? Everly asked. Doesn't she know? No, that's why I'm asking. She doesn't remember. Sophie, what happened? Nora asked. I thought you went back to your room last night. I said I was asking for a friend. Like hell you are, Nora said. Spill it, honey. Tell us everything. That's the problem. I can't, I said miserably. There's so much I don't remember. Sophie, did you wake up naked with a man this morning? Everly asked. I nodded. At the Bellagio. They all gasped. It was Camden Cox. They gasped again, louder. Nora took my hand, and her voice was uncharacteristically gentle. Honey, are we talking about a situation where there wasn't consent? No, I said, shaking my head. No, nothing like that. I'm sure if anything did happen, it was consensual. I assume your inability to recollect is due to excessive alcohol consumption? Hazel asked. I nodded again. It's okay, sweetie, Everly said. Just do your best. Start at the beginning. What happened after dinner? I explained how I'd decided to go to the casino by myself after they'd all gone to their rooms. About winning, and then Cox appearing, how I'd kept winning and we'd kept celebrating, and how by the time we'd left Mandalay Bay with Drake Meadows and Marika, I was already drunk enough that everything from there on out was very hazy. So you gambled and partied all night with Camden Cox, the boy who pulled your pigtails when you were kids, and you woke up naked with him in his hotel? Nora asked. That's basically it. I remember bits and pieces, but... Sophie! An excited voice cut me off, and a woman with platinum blonde hair and a clingy red dress rushed over to our table. She had a butterfly tattoo right in the center of her cleavage. I'm so happy I caught you this morning. She looked vaguely familiar, her face featuring in the misty, broken slideshow that made up last night's memories. But I didn't know her name or why she was so excited to see me. What was I supposed to say? Think, Sophie, think. Hi. Nice to see you too. These are my friends, Nora, Hazel, and Everly. Tanya, she said with a wave. Oh my God, Sophie, you were the absolute cutest last night. When I get married, you have to promise me you'll be my maid of honor. Maid of honor? The pics from Drake's wedding are all over the internet already, and you look amazing in all of them. All over the internet? She smacked a piece of gum and nodded. And the toast you gave? I still get a little choked up when I think about it. This time, I stopped myself from repeating what she'd said in the form of a question. I'd given a toast? Wow, I'm glad you liked it. So much. You're a badass bitch. I gotta go. The crew is heading down to the Wynn for the buffet. I'll see you later. Bye, I said, not even trying to hide my bewilderment as she walked away. She met up with a tall guy who looked like the drummer from... No, he was the drummer from Monkey Rum. He was freaking famous. He gave me the rock-on symbol with both hands. See you, Soph. Swallowing hard, I waved back. Holy shit, Nora said, her eyes on her phone. Sophie, you were in Drake Meadows' wedding? I guess so. Let me see. Everly grabbed for Nora's phone and her eyes widened. Oh my God, you were. Apparently she gave a toast, Hazel said. Maybe I did. What else did you do last night? Nora asked. Well, I'm pretty sure I was a ring girl at an MMA fight. What's that? Everly asked. They walk around the ring in a bikini, holding up a number to tell the crowd what round it is, Nora said. Where did you get a bikini? I think I just took my dress off and did it in my underwear. Nora raised her eyebrows. Hot. No, it's not hot. It's crazy, I said. Oh my God, that's probably on the internet too. We'll find it later, and I'm sure you looked fierce, Nora said. You have a banging body. That perked me up a little, and I cracked a smile. Thanks. So what happened with Cox this morning? Nora asked. Was he surprised to see you in his room, or do you think he remembers more than you do? He was asleep when I woke up. I really wanted to sneak out before he saw me, but my clothes were everywhere. I never did find my bra. Anyway, that's not important. I have other bras. When he did wake up, he didn't seem surprised to see me. He just said, "Morning," in that slight southern drawl of his. I wonder where it comes from. He had it when we were kids, too. Okay, focus, Nora said. He didn't say anything about last night? Not really, although I didn't exactly give him a chance. I fell flat on my face, then grabbed my clothes and got dressed. I bolted out of there as fast as I could. I can't blame you for that, Everly said. Have you at least gone through the photos on your phone? Hazel asked. Those might give you more clues as to what happened last night. That's an excellent suggestion, Nora said. Not yet, I said. I'm afraid to look. They all raised their eyebrows at me. With a resigned breath, I took out my phone and opened the photo gallery. The first ones weren't so bad. I'd taken a few selfies with Cox at the craps table, and I did look awfully cute. Nora had done a great job with my hair and makeup. There were several more with the other people who'd been playing with us. We sure looked happy. I kept swiping through the gallery. Shots of people in the limo. There were Tanya and the drummer, Drake and Marika, and a few others I couldn't remember. More selfies with Cox holding up champagne flutes, me hugging JJ, the limo driver. Well, that was embarrassing. We'd hugged last night, and I hadn't recognized him this morning. There were photos at another casino. Another one of Cox at what must have been the MMA fight. None of me as a ring girl. I wondered if Cox had taken any, and I couldn't decide if I hoped he hadn't or hoped he had. It seemed like I'd taken 100 at Drake and Marika's wedding. Someone, maybe Cox, had snapped a few of me giving a toast, and then more selfies. But none of this was too bad. Maybe we hadn't actually... Except... Oh no. Oh no. Oh my God. We did. Nora's lips curled in a grin. Did you take sex pics? No, that's not what I mean. I stared at the photo and I knew. The memory that kept knocking on the back door of my brain suddenly burst in. My hands trembled as I held up my phone so they could see the truth. The epic disaster that I'd wrought. The horrifying conclusion to my wild night in Vegas. There hadn't just been one wedding last night. There'd been 2. I think I married Camden Cox. Chapter 9. Sophie. Silence settled over the table as my 3 best friends stared at me in horror. I turned my phone back around so I could look again. There we were, standing in a wedding chapel. I was in my purple dress, holding a bouquet of white flowers, and I had a single white rose tucked behind one ear. Cox had been wearing a button-down shirt, vest, and slacks, and somehow, even without a jacket and tie, he looked perfect. The officiant had been an Elvis impersonator. How terribly cliché. Okay, everybody stay calm, Nora said. That photo doesn't mean you actually got married, even if you went through a ceremony. She's right. Hazel adjusted her glasses. You would have needed a marriage license. I'm pretty sure we got a license. Slowly lowering my phone, I searched my memory. We had to rush to the marriage bureau because it was almost midnight and that's when they close. But we made it just in time. I think the clerk was really nice. Oh my God, Sophie, that means today is your wedding day, Everly said. Nora and Hazel's gazes swung to her. What? If she got married after midnight, that means technically it's today. A tight ball of emotion tried to work its way up my throat, spreading panic as it went. I'd signed it. I'd signed the marriage license. I remembered doing it. Oh my God. I really had married Cox last night, or early this morning. Whatever. This is so bad. My voice shook. You guys, I got married and I can't remember if we had sex. But I don't even know if that matters because it isn't like you have to consummate the marriage to make it legal. Everly, where's Shepard? Hazel asked. He knows Cox. Maybe he could call him for Sophie and— No! A bubble of panic burst in my chest. No, please don't tell Mr. Calloway. He'll fire me. He won't fire you, Everly said. He might. They have a business deal, and I married Cox in Vegas, and that just seems like some kind of conflict of interest. Please don't tell him. Not yet. Everly chewed her bottom lip for a second. I'll give it a day or two, but I can't keep secrets from him. My shoulders slumped in resignation. No, I won't ask you to lie to your husband for me. Just maybe don't mention anything about it unless you have to. Smiling, she nodded. Okay. I rubbed my hands up and down my face. What am I going to do? Nora pushed her mostly full Bloody Mary toward me. The first thing you're going to do is drink this. I winced, not sure I was ready to put even a drop of alcohol in my body. And then what? I have absolutely no idea, she said. I'd love to tell you this isn't a disaster, but it is. I suppose all you can do now is get in touch with Cox and figure out how to get it annulled. You don't have any reason to believe you're first cousins, do you? Hazel asked. What? No, why? She shrugged. It's one of the conditions under which Nevada grants annulments. Maybe I did want that Bloody Mary. I took a sip. No, we're not related, and we were drunk, but obviously we convinced the clerk at the marriage bureau that we were sober enough. Everly reached across the table to squeeze my hand. I'm sure there will be an easy way to fix this. This kind of thing probably happens in Vegas all the time. I bet they have a window at the marriage bureau just for quickie annulments. And the good news is, our flight isn't until this afternoon, so you have plenty of time to take care of it. I gave her a weak smile. That's true. Is there anything we can do to help? Hazel asked. I don't think so. Like Everly said, there has to be an easy way to fix this. It must happen all the time here. Our food came, and I ate my brunch, trying to keep my spirits up. But Nora was right. This was a disaster, and not just any disaster, a Sophie disaster. But I'd just do what I always did when things went awry. I'd clean up the mess. My heart fluttered in my chest as I walked through the ornate Bellagio lobby. Again. It was just as pretty now as it had been this morning, but that wasn't why I was here. Although I'd married Cox, I hadn't gotten his number. This was such a mess. I went to the front desk, and the attendant greeted me with a warm smile. What can I do for you? This is going to sound a little bit silly, but I left without my room key, and I can't remember my room number. What name is the reservation under? Camden Cox? She typed something, and a second later her brow furrowed. It shows he's already checked out. Are you Mrs. Cox? My knees buckled like my legs were about to give out. I grabbed the desk and held on so I wouldn't fall. Sorry. Yes, sort of. I mean, yes, I am Mrs. Cox. Her expression shifted from friendly to mildly confused. Well, it appears he checked out this morning. Would you like me to check with the concierge to see if your bags were left here? No, thank you. I didn't have any. Never mind. It's a long story. Thanks anyway. I spun around and walked away. This was all so embarrassing. Plan A was a bust, and I didn't have a plan B. I'd been counting on finding Cox here. After some internet research, I determined that, unfortunately, Everly was wrong. There wasn't a quick and easy way to get an annulment, not even in Vegas. In fact, I wasn't even sure if we'd qualify for one. The list of reasons included things like being underage or being unlawfully coerced. Unfortunately for me, the list didn't include I was really drunk and didn't mean to. So it appeared I'd be taking this predicament home with me. I'd have to call his office tomorrow and go from there. There wasn't anything else I could do. Mrs. Cox? Excuse me, Mrs. Cox. I stopped in my tracks, my eyes widening. Oh God, Mrs. Cox was me. Afraid to find out why someone was calling for me by that name, I slowly looked over my shoulder. The woman from the front desk approached with a small gift bag. Mrs. Cox, this was left at the concierge desk for you. Thank you. My hands trembled as I took the bag. There was a little card clipped to it that read Mrs. Sophie Cox. Had he written that? Or the concierge? I reached inside and pulled out my bra. With a gasp, I shoved it back in. She gave me a bewildered smile and left. At least I had my bra back. With a sigh, I went outside to get a taxi back to my hotel. I had a flight to catch.
Chapter 10. Cox. By the time I got home that afternoon, I still had a fucking headache. I left my sunglasses on and went straight for the kitchen. My personal chef had already meal prepped, so I grabbed a finished meal and popped it in the microwave. I headed over to the liquor cabinet and eyed the bottles for about 3 seconds before deciding more alcohol was not what my body needed right now. Instead, I grabbed my dinner out of the microwave, something with chicken and vegetables that smelled great, and took it to the dining table. I'd bought this house on Lake Washington mostly for the view. It was spectacular from almost every window. And the house itself was gorgeous. It had hardwood floors and the original trim and baseboards. I liked a house with character, and this one had plenty. I ate my dinner and was about to get up to take a shower when the front door opened. I groaned at the sound of high heels clicking on the hardwood floor. She hadn't wasted any time, had she? Althea swept in, dressed like she was on her way to the office, even though it was a Sunday evening. She had an annoying habit of barging in here unannounced to discuss things that could wait until we were at the office. It had gotten worse since her divorce last year.
What the hell, Cox?
Nice to see you too. My trip was great. Thanks for asking.
I realize your trip was great.
She held up her phone. I took off my sunglasses and peered at her phone. It was a photo on someone's Instagram of me with Drake Meadows and Sophie. I ignored it. Calloway's interested. I expect he'll sign by the end of the week. She opened her mouth like she'd meant to keep ranting at me, but paused.
The meeting went well?
Very well. He likes what we're planning. I'll have Oliver send the full prospectus tomorrow.
Well, at least you have some good news.
I sat back in my chair and crossed my arms. I was in Vegas. Things got a little crazy. What are you, the morality police?
Hardly. But need I remind you that this project is already on thin ice thanks to Dominic's extracurricular activities?
Then you'll be happy to know there weren't any hookers. She rolled her eyes.
That's something.
For fuck's sake, Althea, I partied with some rock stars in Vegas. It's not like it's the first time. What's the problem?
Your image is the problem. Another scandal right now wouldn't just ruin the project, it could ruin you.
Stop being dramatic.
I'm not being dramatic. I'm being practical. One of us has to be.
On the contrary, I'm immensely practical. Shaking her head, she walked to the liquor cabinet and helped herself to a glass of whiskey.
You're ridiculous, that's what you are.
I drummed my fingers on the table, my eyes on my empty plate. Should I tell her? She was going to find out sooner or later, and the tongue lashing would probably be worse if I waited. Might as well rip the bandage off now. Get it the fuck over with. There's something else. She paused with her glass halfway to her lips. What? I got married. That's not funny, Cox. It's not a joke. She laughed and took a long swallow. Of course it's a joke. Got married to who? Sophie Abbott. Who the fuck is Sophie Abbott? The way she said Sophie's name with barely disguised venom almost made me fly out of my seat. My jaw hitched and I clenched my hands into fists. She's the woman I married last night. What the hell are you talking about? I stood, grabbing my plate, and took it to the kitchen. I don't know how I can possibly be more clear. I got married. Her name is Sophie. We knew each other as kids. Althea followed me in. Jesus fucking Christ, you're serious? Yeah, but I hardly think it calls for that level of alarm. Is it legal? God, please tell me it wasn't legal. Come on, you know me. I don't do anything halfway. Of course it was legal. You're telling me that you married some random girl in Vegas last night? She's not some random girl. I told you, she's Sophie Abbott. I've known her for years. I allowed myself a slight stretch of the truth with that one. Her eyes flashed with anger. How could you be so reckless? I chuckled as I refilled my water. Well, to be fair, I was pretty drunk. She slammed her whiskey down on the counter. You are unfucking believable. You go to Vegas for a goddamn business meeting, and instead of blowing some money in a casino and anonymously fucking some girl who's too young for you, you get married? Legally married? I scowled at her. She was making too big of a deal out of this. At least I wasn't doing lines of coke off a hooker's ass. Marriage is wholesome, and Sophie is... I cut myself off because I'd been about to say perfect. A quickie Vegas marriage followed by a messy divorce is not wholesome. That's a fucking scandal. Who said anything about a messy divorce? You're not going to stay married to her. Of course not. You don't get it, do you? There's no prenup. That one drunken mistake could cost you millions. I waved that off. Sophie wouldn't do that. Any woman would do that. Why else did she marry you? Leaning against the counter, I hesitated for a second. Why had she married me? Because we were drunk? Well, that was true. We had been drunk as fuck, but what had made a drunk Sophie Abbott think that marrying me was a good idea? I didn't know the answer to that, nor did I know how I could be so sure Sophie wasn't a gold-digging opportunist. But somehow, I was sure of it. She wasn't. Look, Sophie isn't coming after my money. We'll just get a quick annulment, and it'll be like it never happened. It's not that easy. You can't just get a marriage annulled, even a Vegas marriage. You're the lawyer. I'm sure you can handle it. She practically spit fire at me. Unless you want to claim that you coerced her, or she coerced you, I don't think even I can spin this to make you qualify for an annulment. So we'll get a divorce. What's the big deal? It's just some paperwork. A divorce isn't just some paperwork. Trust me. I tipped my head in acknowledgement. She would know. And then there's the fact that you don't have a prenup. I'm really looking forward to Sophie proving you wrong on this one. She's not after my money. Worst case scenario, I'll offer her a settlement. It'll be fine. I don't know how you can be so cavalier about this. The biggest project of your career hangs in the balance, and you don't think a very public divorce after a drunken Vegas wedding is a problem. No, I don't think Sophie is a problem. The fact that we got married is inconvenient, I'll give you that. It's a lot more than an inconvenience. I swallowed the rest of my water, giving myself a chance to think, because I had an idea. If you're so worried about my public image, I'll just stay married to her for a while. Althea gaped at me. What? This idea was quickly growing on me. We'll stay married. Once we break ground on Skyline and everyone is in too deep to back out over something as inconsequential as my personal life, we'll file for divorce. Problem solved.
The longer you stay married to her, the more likely it is she'll get half. She really needed to stop talking about Sophie like that. That isn't an issue. I'll make a private arrangement with her and make it worth her while. You can't be serious. Serious as a heart attack. You won't be able to pull this off. People will find out. The only thing people are going to find out is that Camden Cox married a cute sugar bug of a girl on a whirlwind trip to Vegas. The color drained from her face and she looked like she might be sick. You've lost your mind. Now you really are being dramatic. I slid my phone out of my pocket and started a text to Oliver. What are you doing? Texting Oliver to send my wife flowers. She's not your wife. I glanced up at her. According to the state of Nevada, she is. She rolled her eyes again. Fine, have it your way, but don't say I didn't warn you. You're my lawyer, and I hear your legal advice loud and clear. My phone buzzed with a text from Oliver, but I'd already decided flowers weren't enough, and I was going to need to see to this personally. I headed toward my room to shower. Thanks, Althea. See you tomorrow. Indulging in a smug, self-congratulatory smile, I left Althea to finish her whiskey and see herself out. I was going to take this little problem I'd created and turn it into something else entirely. So we'd gotten married. It wasn't the end of the world. Sophie Abbott was sweet as sugar, hot as a sweltering summer day in Texas, and for the time being, my wife. Whether or not I'd taken her to bed in Vegas, I was going to. And this time, it was going to be a night we'd both remember.
Chapter 11. Sophie. Monday morning was so busy. I could barely keep up with everything, let alone spare a single second to call Cox's office. It wasn't that I was avoiding him. Mr. Calloway was very uncompromising, and it wouldn't do for me to get in trouble at work. Okay, that was a total lie. It was only normal busy, and I kept making up new things to do so I wouldn't have to call. I knew I had to. I couldn't avoid him forever. But maybe I could avoid him until the afternoon, or Tuesday. Tuesday sounded better. The aftermath of a drunken wedding in Vegas was a lot for a Monday. But as soon as Nina came to my desk carrying a box tied with a big pink ribbon, I knew my weekend in Vegas had come to find me. She set it on my desk. For you. Thanks, I said weakly, staring at the box. Without looking at the note, I knew it was from him. It had to be. What would a man like Camden Cox send to the woman he'd accidentally married in Vegas over the weekend? It had to be some kind of breakup gift, a way of apologizing for the mess we'd gotten ourselves into, because what else could it be? When I thought about it like that, it was nice of him. But why did the idea of a breakup gift from Cox make my stomach feel so awful? Now I was just being silly. It wasn't like we were going to stay married. Sure, we'd had fun over the weekend, but that was Vegas. It wasn't the real world. And anybody would have fun with that much alcohol. He was Camden Cox, childhood meanie and puller of pigtails. Staring at the box wasn't doing me any good, so I took a deep breath. The ribbon slid off easily, and I removed the lid. Tissue paper crinkled as I unwrapped it. My eyes widened when I realized what it was, a lacy black bra and panties set. With a surprised squeak, I smashed down the tissue paper, trying to cover the lace. I lifted my eyes to see if anyone had noticed, and met Steve's gaze from across the aisle. His mouth was open, his eyebrows lifted. Yep, he'd seen it. It's from my friend Nora, I blurted out. I don't know why she sent it here instead of my apartment. Steve adjusted his glasses. Uh-huh. He totally didn't believe me. God, why had Cox sent me underwear? That was a weird breakup gift. Was breakup the right word? What did you call it when you had to get yourself unmarried after mistakenly marrying someone you barely knew? There probably wasn't a word for it because that wasn't really a thing. Most people wouldn't get themselves into a situation like this. Most people weren't me. I glanced around again to see if anyone was watching. Steve had gone back to whatever he'd been doing and peeked beneath the tissue paper again. There was a little envelope tucked inside. I took out the note and read it. Hey, sugar. These made me think of you. Just promise me one thing. No wearing them in the ring at an MMA fight. These are for my eyes only. Your husband. Husband? Oh my God. He was kidding, right? He had to be kidding. From what I remembered of our wild night in Vegas, I had laughed a lot, leading me to believe Cox was funny. So this must be his idea of a joke. Fine, I could take a joke. This also meant I needed to stop procrastinating and call him. With my heart beating uncomfortably hard, I called his office.
Camden Cox's office. This is Oliver.
Hi, Oliver. This is Sophie Abbott.
Well, hello there, darling. I was expecting your call.
You were?
Certainly. What works better for you, lunch or dinner?
Wait, what?
I assume you're calling to set up what shall we call it? A date?
Oh my God, did he know? He probably knew. Oh, no, not a date. It's more like a meeting.
Meeting sounds boring.
It's more accurate than a date. He chuckled.
Try telling him that.
What was that supposed to mean? I don't think I can get away for lunch today, so I guess dinner?
You don't sound convinced. Aren't you looking forward to seeing your husband?
Oliver, I hissed into the phone. No, that's not... We're not... I mean, we are, but...
I'm sorry, darling. I shouldn't tease you. I'll be serious now, I promise. But Mr. Cox did tell me to expect your call and to ask whether you'd like to have lunch or dinner with him. So dinner, then.
Yeah, that works.
Beautiful. I have you down. Can I get your home address?
Sure. I rattled off my address for him.
Great. I'll have the driver pick you up around 7, if that works.
7 is fine, but I don't need...
Cheers, love. And that was that. With another deep breath, I hung up the phone, then put the lid back on the box and tucked it under my desk. I didn't want to accidentally knock it over and have the contents spill out. With my luck, it would happen right at Mr. Calloway's feet, and I'd have to explain why Camden Cox was sending me lingerie. Not a conversation you wanted to have with your boss. Just like Oliver said, a driver arrived at my apartment to pick me up right at 7. He politely ushered me into the back of the limo, but it was empty. No Cox. I tried not to fidget on the large seat as we drove. Maybe I should have asked to sit up front like I had with JJ in Vegas. We turned down a long drive with an amazing view of the water and parked in front of a large house with a covered entryway and dark wood double doors. The windows glowed with light, and I could see it was right on the lake. Apparently, he hadn't just invited me to dinner. He'd invited me to his house for dinner. The driver opened the door for me, and I got out just as Cox appeared in the entry. "Thanks, Carson," he said.
The driver lifted his hand in greeting, then got back in the limo. Cox turned his attention back to me, and the smile that stole across his face made my tummy flutter. "It's fine, Sophie. He's just your accidental husband, who lives in a mansion on the lake. No big deal."
"Hi, sugar," he said, and that accent was going to be the death of me. "Thanks for coming." I approached, trying to act like everything was fine, but it was hitting me hard that I'd married this man and I had no idea what we were going to do about it.
"Thanks for inviting me." He gestured for me to come in, so I followed him inside. He shut the door and led me into the kitchen, the most incredible kitchen I'd ever seen. It was big and open, with wood cabinets and granite counters.
"Can I get you a drink?" he asked. I snort-laughed as I set my coat and purse on a stool.
"I think I'll stick with water, or something non-alcoholic at least."
The corner of his lips twitched. "We do seem to get ourselves into mischief when alcohol's involved."
Mischief, more like an epic disaster.
It's not that bad, is it?
We got married. I paused for a second. We did, right? It's legal.
Afraid so. Looks like you're stuck with me.
I laughed again, but there wasn't a lot of humor in it. Until we figure out how to fix it. He didn't say anything for a moment, just started taking to-go containers out of a brown bag. But the way his eyes flicked to me and back to the food made me wonder what he was thinking.
I'm not much of a cook, he said finally, so I had Oliver do the honors and order dinner. I hope you like Thai.
I love Thai food. Can I help with anything?
Sure.
I helped him bring dinner to the dining table and only stopped to gape at the view for a moment or two. This felt so strange, so quiet. When we'd been together in Vegas, it had been all bright lights and noise. This was so serene. We sat and dished up. Everything smelled amazing.
So, how was your flight home?
He asked when we were both settled with our dinner. It wasn't bad. Yours?
Flying with a hangover is never pleasant, but at least it wasn't far. Did you get the package I left for you at the Bellagio?
My cheeks warmed. I couldn't believe I'd dashed out of his room without my bra. I did. Thanks. For a second, I thought about asking if he'd written Mrs. Sophie Cox on that note, but decided against it.
I wasn't sure if you'd go back for it.
Is that why you sent me the, gift today?
I thought it was fitting, he said with a grin. How long have you worked for Shepard Calloway?
About 2 years.
Do you like your job?
I love my job. I'm not really one for being in the spotlight, so I like working behind the scenes, if that makes sense. And Mr. Calloway is a great boss.
That's good to hear. What about family?
I tilted my head. You're very inquisitive.
I'm just trying to get to know my wife.
I rolled my eyes at his joke. His wife. Hilarious. I'm an only child. My mom passed away when I was little, so it was just me and my dad. He met my eyes, and there was an intensity to them that made my heart flutter again.
I'm very sorry to hear that.
Thanks. What about you?
I'm also an only child of a single parent, although in my case, it's my mom.
That was interesting. I thought I remembered Cox living with both parents when we were kids, but maybe I was mistaken. Are you close to her now?
Very.
That's nice. Does she live nearby? I took another bite of my dinner. Delicious.
She does. I moved her up here from Texas a few years ago.
He wiped his mouth, then set his napkin aside.
I suppose we should talk about our marriage.
I laughed a little. I don't know if we should call it that.
We are married.
I know, but it's not like we meant to. We don't even know each other.
We've known each other since we were 11.
Not exactly. Until you helped me off that balcony, we probably hadn't seen each other in 20 years. The corner of his mouth lifted.
Oh, yes, the balcony.
My cheeks warmed. Stop.
You know, in some cultures, arranged marriages are still common. The bride and groom might not even meet until they're already married.
And your point is,
maybe this isn't such a bad thing.
My mouth hung open for a second as those words swirled around in my head. Not such a bad thing? You can't be suggesting we stay married.
No, of course not. At least not long term.
What does that mean? He held my eyes, and that intensity in his gaze was back, making my tummy whirl with something. Nervousness, excitement, arousal. No, definitely not arousal. Okay, maybe a little.
Hear me out, he said. My former business partner, let's say he got caught in a compromising position that resulted in an unfortunate public scandal.
He was doing coke with prostitutes.
You heard.
Everybody did.
Fair enough. Because of that, I lost several investors in a multi-million-dollar project I'm putting together. That's why I went to your boss. If Callaway invests and my other investors stay on board, which I think they will, the project will be back on track and all will be well with the world.
What does that have to do with us? You don't want me to try to influence my boss, do you?
No, of course not. The project speaks for itself. It's a great opportunity, and I'm sure he knows that. The problem is, another public scandal could bring everything grinding to a halt again. Specifically, a public scandal involving a drunken Vegas wedding and a messy divorce.
Why would it be messy? It seems pretty straightforward to me. He looked at me for a moment, his mouth lifting in a subtle smile, and once again I wished I knew what he was thinking.
You're right. It probably wouldn't be messy, although my lawyer is all up in arms about it. But I'm just going to level with you. It would be a lot better for me if we stayed married for now. We can take care of the paperwork when the project is underway, and a personal matter like a divorce isn't going to scare away my investors.
I blinked in confusion. Wait, you're serious, aren't you?
Absolutely.
But we can't. We're not. That isn't.
It's just a little delay in the paperwork, no big deal.
We're married. That's kind of a big deal. His eyebrows drew in.
Why?
Because it's marriage. As soon as I'd said it, I realized there was a fundamental disconnect between us. I did think marriage was a big deal. It was supposed to mean something. Maybe everything. It was supposed to mean forever. But Cox didn't take it seriously. To him, it didn't really mean anything. Of course, this wasn't a real marriage and never had been, so it didn't matter if he believed in marriage. He leaned forward, resting his forearms on the table.
I'll make it worth your while.
How? The corner of his mouth twitched in a smile, and Vegas memories flashed through my mind. That slow, sexy grin as he handed me a celebratory shot of whiskey. Then a flash of him kneeling next to me in his hotel room the next morning, naked. Stop, Sophie. Don't be distracted by his huge gifts.
That is a good question, he said. What do you want?
Uh-oh. I was about to start negotiating with him, which meant I was kind of maybe, possibly considering this. Could I really be considering this? But as soon as he'd asked, "What do you want?" an answer had popped into my mind. A crazy answer, much too big, he'd never agree, but an answer nonetheless, and possibly the one thing that would make his plan worth it. "I'll do it if you buy my dad a new house." His eyebrows lifted.
A house?
Yes, not a big one or anything. He doesn't need a lot of space. But he lives in a 2-story, and the bedrooms are all on the 2nd floor. He has a hard time going up and down stairs, so he sleeps in his recliner in the living room. Because he's disabled, he had to retire early, so his income is limited and housing is so expensive. I haven't been able to find a place he can afford that's all on one level and in good shape and in a good neighborhood. He doesn't get out much, so he has to have a home where he's really happy. Otherwise, it's just going to be awful for him. I clapped my hand over my mouth because I had not meant to share all that.
Done,
Cox said. Wait, what?
If you stay married to me, I'll buy your dad a house with no stairs that's in good shape and a good neighborhood.
You can't be serious.
I said I'd make it worth your while. If this makes it worth your while, I'll do it.
Just like that. He'll own it, free and clear?
Absolutely.
I searched my mind for a downside, other than the fact that this was kind of ridiculous and probably crazy. But was it? Like he said, it was just a delay in the paperwork. It wasn't like I was dating anyone who'd be mad at me for getting and staying married to him. It wouldn't really change anything. How long do we need to stay married?
A couple of months. 6 tops.
I paused to take a deep breath, wondering how this was going to go sideways, because so many things in my life seemed to go sideways. But maybe it already had, and this was the silver lining to my Vegas marriage cloud. Not just a silver lining, but the sun bursting through the clouds to spread warmth and happiness in the form of a very, very tempting solution for my dad. He'd done so much for me. I could do this for him. Okay, I'll do it. Chapter 12. Sophie. My first week as a sort of married woman went by without any more surprises or provocative deliveries from Cox. By the weekend, I'd decided that my decision to stay married was clearly the smart choice. Nothing much had changed. I went to work, checked on my dad, went for a run, and then out for drinks with my friends. No biggie. Although I started to feel guilty for asking for something as extravagant as a house in exchange for basically doing nothing. All I had to do was not file for divorce right away. It didn't seem like he was getting nearly as much out of this as I was. But he'd agreed to do it without even a moment's hesitation, so maybe buying my dad a house was nothing to him. I had no idea what it would be like to have that kind of money. Although at the moment, I had no idea what it would be like to have enough money that I didn't have to live in a shoebox apartment in a crappy neighborhood either. So I was light years away from buy someone a house money. Be that as it may, I rounded out my weekend with another visit to Dad, who spent most of the afternoon shouting at the TV about the injustice of his favorite Seattle football player being traded to another team. And Kale. He somehow worked in another rant about Kale. It was impressive, really. By Monday morning, I was convinced I had this thing on lockdown. No problem. Except, I hadn't exactly told anyone about agreeing to stay married to Cox. My friends had asked about it over martinis on Saturday, and I'd hedged, saying we were working on it. It wasn't a lie, exactly. I was just fudging the truth a little bit, because we were working on it. Or we would be in a few months when Cox was sure it wouldn't impact his big development deal. Obviously, I was going to tell them, but since this whole marriage thing was just a legal technicality, I didn't want to make a big fuss about it. That did leave the matter of my dad. I was going to have to explain things, especially when it came time to drop the bomb that I'd negotiated a new house for him. It was going to take some coaxing to get him on board, and by some coaxing, I meant a concerted effort over weeks, possibly months, to soften him up to the idea that I was taking care of his housing situation. My dad did not like accepting charity, especially for something so big, and especially when it was coming from me. Cooking him dinner once in a while was one thing. Getting him a new house was quite another. This was going to be a tough sell. The only other crack in my self-assurance that everything would be fine was the fact that Cox kept texting me. A lot. Not so much that it was annoying or creepy, but enough that I started to realize he wasn't going to disappear and reappear in a few months when it was time to get divorced. I had no idea why he was doing it. Maybe he was just making conversation. Maybe he thought it was funny. Maybe he didn't have any hobbies, and texting me randomly gave him something to do. "Morning, sugar. Have a good day. I just had lunch at McCormick and Schmick's. Ever been there? More permits came through. Might need to pop some champagne to celebrate. Have you tried on the bra and panties I sent you?" With the exception of that last one, his messages resulted in brief conversations. We'd text back and forth a few times. Then, hours later, or maybe the next day, he'd text something else. I hadn't even had too many text fails. I was convinced my phone was inhabited by an autocorrect demon whose mission was to mess up my texts as embarrassingly as possible. I'd named him Kane, but Kane had been oddly inactive in my conversations with Cox, and I hadn't answered his question about the bra and panties. But yes, I had tried them on. They were exquisite. He clearly hadn't picked them up at Target. They felt expensive, luxurious, decadent, and the bra was miraculously supportive while still being sexy, which was a rare find. Most bras that fit boobs like mine were beige and boring, not magic, gravity-defying lace that let the twins be the best versions of themselves. So on Monday, I indulged and wore my new silky, sexy underthings to work, with a dress on over them, obviously. Although honestly, they looked amazing on me. If ever I was going to show up at work and play out the nightmarish scene of walking down the aisle toward my desk in nothing but my bra and panties, it would be in these. Apparently, my sort of husband had great taste in underwear. Not long after lunch, I sat at my desk and cast a quick, admiring glance down at my chest. This bra worked so well with this dress. When Mr. Calloway emerged from his office, my heart did a little dance in my chest, but it wasn't his appearance that caused the flutter. It was because I knew where he was going. He had a meeting with Cox. I had no idea why that made me feel so jittery, but it only got worse when he stopped at my desk.
I need you to come with me. As if I were operating on autopilot, rather than by making conscious choices, I stood and gathered my things. He waited by my desk long enough for me to fall in step behind him, and without another word, started walking to the elevator. Okay, this was fine. I'd been through a meeting with Cox and Mr. Calloway in Vegas and survived. Of course, that had been before we'd gotten married, but that didn't mean anything had to be different now. I could do this. We rode the elevator to the parking garage and got in Mr. Calloway's car. Cox's office wasn't far, probably walkable on a nice day, but the gray drizzle outside made me glad for my hair that we hadn't. In all of 2 blocks, it would have turned into a frizzy nightmare. With curls still intact, wrap dress adjusted, and fortifying breaths taken, I followed Mr. Calloway up to Camden Cox's office. The elevator opened directly into the lobby. A Cox Development logo decorated the wall behind the front desk, and there was comfortable-looking furniture for waiting guests. The colors were cool and calming, beachy blues and grays that contrasted with the dark brown leather couch and chairs. A man wearing a headset that somehow didn't crush his spiky blonde hair greeted us with a friendly smile. What can I do for you? Shepard Calloway here to see Camden Cox. Of course, one moment, please.
The receptionist spoke quietly to someone through his headset, letting them know Mr. Cox's 2 o'clock had arrived. The instant Oliver came through the doorway to the right of the front desk, I knew it was him. It had to be him. He was tall and lean, with sharp cheekbones, auburn hair, a smooth jaw, and a smart pair of glasses. He wore a tweed vest over a button-down shirt and tie, with slacks and brown shoes.
Mr. Calloway, right this way,
he said, cute British accent and all. His eyes landed on me, and his mouth curled in a smile.
Sophie, I presume.
Yes, hi, it's nice to meet you in person.
You as well, darling. I'll take you back.
I let out a relieved breath. Thank goodness he hadn't called me Sophie Cox, or worse, Mrs. Cox, and followed him and Mr. Calloway. As soon as we walked in, Cox stood. He was dressed in a button-down shirt with the collar loose, sleeves cuffed. His eyes slid up and down my body like a soft caress, and the corner of his mouth lifted. Pressing my lips together, I gave my head a little shake. Don't you dare say anything, Cox. Don't you dare. He smoothly turned to Mr. Calloway and held out his hand.
Thanks for coming.
They shook and nodded to each other. Then Mr. Calloway and I took a seat. See, totally fine, just business. Cox's gaze dipped to my chest, and there was that almost smirk again. I cleared my throat. Without missing a beat, he slid a folder in front of him and opened it, as if he hadn't just been ogling my boobs.
Can I get you any refreshments? Coffee? Tea? Oliver asked.
Mr. Calloway shook his head without looking up.
No.
No, thank you, I said.
Thanks, Oliver, Cox said. We're good.
Oliver gave me a subtle wink, then left, closing the door behind him. A second later, the door flew open. A woman with platinum blonde hair tied at the nape of her neck walked in, already talking. "We need to—" She stopped short, her lips parted. "I didn't realize you were busy." A low hum of tension radiated from Cox. His expression barely changed, but I could sense he was annoyed. How could I tell? I barely knew him. Maybe it was just logic. Whoever she was, she'd just barged into a meeting. Mr. Calloway was definitely annoyed. His stiff posture and icy gaze were familiar.
"Althea McClellan," Cox said, gesturing to her. "This is Shepard Calloway and his assistant, Sophie."
A flicker of something. Surprise, maybe, marred her expression, but it was gone as quickly as it had come, and she smiled. "Very nice to meet you. I'll come back. Sorry for the interruption." Her eyes moved from Cox to Mr. Calloway, then to me. They lingered on my face, narrowing slightly, making me wonder if I had something on my nose. I reached up to give it a dainty swipe with one knuckle. She turned and left. That was odd. Did she know who I was?
"Sorry about that,"
Cox said. Mr. Calloway acknowledged his apology with a tilt of his head.
"No problem."
Seamlessly, as if the brief interruption hadn't occurred, they launched into a discussion about the project. Updates, timelines, challenges. I dutifully took notes, recorded dates, and jotted down follow-up questions Mr. Calloway might have later. In short, I did my job, and did not fail to notice Cox's wandering gaze. Somehow, he seemed to have mastered the art of looking at me with undisguised heat without Mr. Calloway catching on. He couldn't have seen the looks Cox was giving me. I knew what he'd do if he caught someone eyeing his assistant like that. It had happened once at a lunch meeting. There had been several of us at the table, and one of the other men had leered at me like I was for sale, and he thought he could get me at a discount. Mr. Calloway's voice had been cold enough to freeze a river of lava, and I'd been surprised the guy's heart hadn't stopped right there, encased in ice. But there was no indication my boss noticed the sweep of Cox's eyes from my face to my chest, the slight hitch in his jaw, or the way his lips twitched. Why did he keep looking at me like that? A hazy Vegas memory ran through my mind. Cox giving me that same look, only with more heat and less subtlety. The blaring noise and lights of the casino fading, as he locked me in a predatory stare and lured me closer, like the helpless prey that I was. An involuntary squeak left my throat. I turned away and coughed to cover it, but when I took a new breath in, I accidentally inhaled a droplet of my own saliva. My throat spasmed, closing off as if I were in danger of drowning. Talk about an overreaction. With my head still turned, I clapped my hand over my mouth to stifle the coughing. My nostrils flared as the ragged breath I took tried to work its way past my clenched airway and into my lungs. Another cough, then a real breath finally made it through. I swallowed, wishing I had... Cox stood next to me, holding out an open bottle of water. Wow, wish granted. I nodded and took the water, not trusting my throat to let me speak without descending into another coughing spasm. The cool liquid soothed as it slid down, easing that tiny spot of irritation that was causing me so much trouble. Mr. Calloway watched me with his usual stoic expression, only a raised eyebrow betraying his concern. "Sorry," I said, my voice a little rough, and took another long swallow of water. My throat got a tickle. Cox hesitated next to me, an odd expression on his face. It wasn't alarm exactly, nor was it the look of mild concern my boss was giving me. It was different, deeper. And for a second, I had the strangest feeling that he wanted to scoop me in his arms and hold me, which was obviously ridiculous. He just wondered what the heck was wrong with me that I was coughing up a lung for no reason. I lifted the now half-empty water bottle, my cheeks warming with embarrassment. "Thank you. Much better."
"Of course."
He paused, still regarding me with that expression I couldn't quite read.
"Need anything else?"
No, I'm fine. I'm sorry to interrupt.
It's all right.
He cleared his throat and went back to his seat. Mr. Calloway's phone buzzed, and he drew it out of his pocket, his brow furrowing.
Excuse me for a moment. I need to take this. There's an empty conference room to the right,
Cox said. He nodded and left to take his call. Cox's gaze swung to me, his cocky smirk out in full force now that we were alone.
Touchy gag reflex. That's good to know.
I scowled at him, but another cough ruined the effect. I told you I got a tickle in my throat.
I hate it when that happens.
It's the worst.
You look beautiful today.
His eyes dipped to my chest again.
That dress is magnificent on you.
My cheeks warmed again. Thank you. The corner of his mouth lifted.
You're wearing them, aren't you?
I knew exactly what he meant, and I was wearing them, but his question flustered me. I looked down at myself as if I were trying to guess what he was talking about. He chuckled softly.
Of course you are. I love that you wore them for me.
I didn't wear them for you. I didn't even know I was coming here. He just smiled. I'm serious. I didn't know I'd see you today.
Speaking of seeing each other, it's been too long. If we're going to make this marriage work, we really need to put in more effort. I'll hold myself responsible for my end, but I need you to meet me in the middle. I rolled my eyes. Oh, sugar, don't be like that. Tell you what, you can make it up to me by going out with me tonight.
What? No.
Why not?
Because I'm not going out with you.
Being married doesn't mean I'm going to stop chasing you. We've got to keep the magic alive, put in the work.
He grinned at me again, his eyes dancing with mischievous fire. A twinge of pressure between my legs almost made me squirm in my seat. I settled for a quick thigh clench, hoping he wouldn't notice. I did not want him to think he was getting to me. He was incorrigible enough as it was. He didn't need more encouragement. I can't tonight.
How about this weekend?
I don't think we should go out.
Why not?
Look at what happened last time. We got married. What are we going to do if we go out again? I stopped and quickly closed my mouth, pressing my lips together. Don't say it, Cox. Don't say make a baby. The evil grin that stole across his features nearly sucked the air from my lungs and sent a flurry of tingles down my spine.
Make a what, sugar?
Nothing. Never mind.
Tell you what. Go out with me on Saturday, and I won't tell your boss that you're my wife.
My eyes widened, and I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting to see Mr. Calloway already standing there. I whipped back around, and my voice was a low hiss. You wouldn't.
I'm trying not to be insulted that you seem to want to hide your husband from those closest to you.
We both know you're not really my husband, and you're not insulted that I didn't tell my boss. Besides, he'd probably kill you if he knew. He chuckled.
I'd like to see him try.
Let's not get into who's the alpha male right now, please.
Then go out with me on Saturday.
You're very accustomed to getting what you want, aren't you?
Sugar, you have no idea.
And you're not going to leave me alone until I agree, are you?
Now you're getting it.
I let out a sigh. Okay, Cox, I'll go out with you. Although I have no idea why you want to go out with me. He smirked. Again, the cheeky bastard.
You're my wife. Do I need a reason?
I didn't bother correcting him this time, just rolled my eyes again. I had a feeling I knew what kind of game he was playing. He was confident to the point of cockiness, accustomed to getting what he wanted. I'd known men like him in my life, my ex being a prime example. Men who could turn on the charm, who knew how to use their gifts very, very well. And for some inexplicable reason, Cox was turning his charm on me. Of course, he probably just wanted what I'd unintentionally showed him that night when I hung off the balcony in no panties. What he may or may not have had once already in Vegas, because honestly, I still wasn't sure. He had his work cut out for him. For once in my life, I wasn't going to be on the receiving end of that kind of disaster. He was Camden Cox, puller of pigtails and breaker of hearts, and I wasn't going to let him break mine.
Chapter 13. Cox. I had Sophie right where I wanted her. Granted, she wasn't naked, pinned beneath me on my bed with my mouth teasing those luscious tits. That was where I really wanted her, but she would be soon enough. She'd denied that it had been for me, but she had worn the bra and panties I'd sent her, and to my office, no less. Tonight, I was going to seal the deal, memorably this time. She had no idea what a treat she was in for. I glanced in the bathroom mirror and started buttoning my shirt, wondering if I should shave or if Sophie preferred my well-trimmed stubble. It was a weekend, but I'd spent most of my day working in my home office and taken a break for a workout this afternoon. That had necessitated another shower before I was fit to be seen. Now my hair was damp and I hadn't yet put on any pants. Oliver waltzed into my master bathroom like he didn't give two shits that I was only half dressed. For a guy who generally had impeccable manners, he was awfully lax about privacy. "The dealership is expecting you. Ask for Jonathan. I texted that to you because I know you probably won't remember." What's that supposed to mean? That most of the time you only half listen to me? I listen, he shrugged. When it suits you. In any case, Jonathan will be ready to roll out the red carpet. I finished buttoning my shirt. Good. Are you sure you don't want me to make a dinner reservation somewhere? No, I've got it. Going to do something a little different tonight. He adjusted his glasses. Interesting. My eyes flicked to him in annoyance as I rubbed a bead of pomade between my fingers. What's with the second guessing? You don't think I know how to take a woman on a date? On the contrary, you're quite skilled at it. Then what's the problem? He hesitated. I wonder if you know what you're getting into. With what? I ran my hands through my hair, massaging in the pomade. Trying to date my wife? He chuckled. You like calling her that. I shot him a glare. I'm just making the best out of the situation. Or taking advantage of it. But a request, if I may. Call her my wife as often as possible around Maleficent. I ignored his jibe at Althea. She does have her panties in a bunch over the whole thing, doesn't she? Quite. Although I dare say bunched panties are a way of life for her. He wasn't wrong, but she was damn good at her job. Are you going to let me finish getting dressed, or would you like to question more of my plans? Just be nice to her. I like this one. One corner of my mouth lifted. Oh, I'm going to be very nice. Don't you worry about that. And another maiden falls victim to the ravishing rogue. You're one to talk. It was his turn to smile. Touché. Speaking of, have you asked her out yet, or are you still dragging your feet? His eyes widened with mock innocence. Who? I rolled my eyes. Don't try to be coy. It's not a good look. The tea shop girl. Scowling, he crossed his arms and glanced away. No. That was odd. Oliver always killed it with the ladies. They went crazy over his accent. Why not? It appears she's already dating someone. I saw him pick her up from work the other day. So, if you want her, swoop in and steal her away. You're good at the game. Don't sit on the sidelines. Get out there and play. I ducked into the walk-in closet to retrieve my pants. Oliver followed. I know, it should be simple. I should have her eating out of my hand by now, but something about her is different. Different how? I can't explain it. She makes me inexplicably nervous. I tugged my slacks up my legs. Nervous about what? And when have you had a conversation with her that didn't involve buying tea? Which, by the way, I saw how much you have stashed in the cupboard in my office. Maybe slow it down a little, or I'll have to open a competing shop and run her out of business. You wouldn't dare. Hey, man, You're the one buying tea from her every day. I know. It's like she's cast a spell on me. I can't stay away, but none of my usual tactics seem fitting. I finished tucking in my shirt and buttoned my pants. You're overthinking it. She's just a girl. His eyes flashed with a sudden flare of, was that anger? But it was gone as quickly as it had come. I dare say she's not, but I don't suppose you'll understand that. In any case, do you need anything else before I retire to my depressingly single life while you enjoy an evening with the lovely Sophie? You bet your ass I'm going to enjoy my evening. And no, take your drama queen attitude home for the night. I paused to give myself another quick glance in the mirror before walking into my bedroom. Don't bug me tomorrow, at least not early. He followed me out. Planning to cook up breakfast? I grinned. I'm a gentleman, aren't I? That's debatable. See ya, Oliver, I said to his back as he walked away. Good night. Chuckling, I cuffed my sleeves. Time to go pick up my wife. Sophie's apartment building was, well, it was fucking unacceptable is what it was. The red brick facade was cracked and worn. At least 2 of the windows had broken glass, and there was a car parked out front that had been stripped of just about everything easily removable. She wanted a house for her dad, but she lived here? I didn't like it. How the hell did my sweet little sugar bug survive in a neighborhood like this? Maybe I'd have to buy her a new house, too. And talk to Calloway about her salary. I got out of my car and leaned against the door while I texted her to let her know I was here. Then I waited and waited.